ahead.
I'm Carol Pratt. I'm a Senior Policy Advisor in the Office of Commissioner of Health, and I'd like to call this meeting to order and welcome you. This is the group meeting for Chapter 932 of the 2020 Acts of Assembly. This meeting is being conducted in a completely virtual environment and is being recorded. There are several things we'd like to review before we get started. First, we ask that members of the work group please mute your lines when you're not speaking, as this reduces the amount of background noise on the call and the potential for audio feedback. We also ask that due to the virtual nature of the meeting, please identify yourself each time you begin to speak so that staff can accurately record the minutes of the meeting. For those attendees who are not members of the work group, you will not be able to unmute yourselves. But when we get to the public comment period, you will be unmuted by the hosts if you have signed up to speak. Ms. Allen, would you please call the roll?
Okay. Alasia Black-Hackett. Megan Green. Judy Jackson.
Here.
Karen Bren.
And just wanted to note I'll have to leave this meeting at about 3 o'clock.
All right. I will keep that in mind. Thank you. Joni Latimer. Gail Thompson. Dana, I'm going to mute your line. It's causing a lot of feedback.
Oh.
Gail Thompson, second call. Jewel Brana. Catherine Paxton.
I'm here.
Charlotte Redoubt.
Here.
Elizabeth Carter.
I'm here.
Okay. Corey Tillman Wolf.
Here.
Kurt Elward. Barbara Seymour. Randall Stamper. Todd Barnes. Heather Legary. Sam Kukich.
Here.
Bob Kukich. Aaron Hines.
Here.
Susan Hines.
Here.
Okay, and you guys are sharing a line today?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, just wanted to check. Lionel DeCure.
Here.
Senator Kiggins. Or Tyler Edmonds if he happens to be on the line in her stead. Christina Holloway. Dana Parsons.
Here.
Alicia Cundiff.
Here.
April Payne.
Present.
And Scott Johnson said he wasn't going to be able to join us today. So is Keith Hare on the call?
Keith, not, but Tyler Cox should be on.
Okay. Let me check and see if he's in the attendees list. Tyler Cox, are you on the line? Okay. I don't see him in the panelist or in my attendee list. The only call-in attendees I have right now are you, April, and then Judy Jackson, just FYI. Vivian McDaniel?
I'm here.
Joe Hilbert? Heather Anderson? All right, Dr. Pratt is here, as am I. So, Dr. Pratt, that completes the roll call.
Thank you. And would you review for us the agenda?
Sure. So the agenda today looks just like the agenda from last time. We'll have our public comment period. Then we're going to be picking up where we left off with the reviewing of the recommendations that the work group will be voting on, and then we'll be discussing the next steps on how that voting is going to take place, what the timeline looks like, and then we're going to wrap up and get this meeting closed. So that is the agenda for today. All right. And as noted on the public comment screen that you see right now, we did receive a few written comments between the last meeting, which was Friday, and today. Those were sent out to you in addition to the agenda and the meeting materials.
Thank you. I do understand that we have some speakers signed up for the comment period, and I'll review for you how this period will work. When you registered for this meeting, there was the opportunity to sign up to speak on a topic. The list of persons who signed up to speak was finalized at 11:30 this morning. Pursuant to the Board of Health public participation policy, each speaker will have a maximum of 2 minutes in which to speak. There will be a countdown timer on the screen, and a bell will ring when the time has elapsed. If the bell rings while a person is speaking, we will allow the speaker to finish that sentence, and then the speaker will be muted and the name of the next speaker will be called. You'll be unmuted by the host when it's your turn to speak. In addition, all speakers are reminded that this is an opportunity for you to address the work group on any topic of your choosing. However, it is not a question and answer period, and there will not be any dialogue back and forth between speakers and work group members. If we have more speakers than the time allotted allows, the remainder of the speakers will be permitted to speak at the end of the meeting under the same rules outlined for this public comment period. Ms. Allen?
All right, so we had 3 speakers sign up, and I'm going to call them in the order in which the registrations came in. So the first person to sign up to speak, is Sam Kukich, and then after her will be Erin Hines. And if you will give me one moment, Ms. Kukich, I'm going to share the timer on the screen. So whenever you're ready.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you?
Yes, I can hear you. Well, hang on. Now you've cut off. Hang on. Let me see if I can manually unmute you. Okay, try again.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can hear you.
Okay, good.
All right, go ahead.
All right. This comment is a concern about accessing information about these workgroup meetings. Many Dignity members feel like they have been left out of the loop and wanted me to share their concerns as to why no minutes have ever been provided for any of the meetings. Taking minutes forms an essential part of these meetings. It confirms decisions made, it records any agreed actions to be taken, it records who's been allocated any tasks or responsibilities, gives prompt action from any relevant attendees, and it provides details of the meetings to anyone unable to attend. The Dignity members have requested minutes numerous times, as well as contact information for all participants. None have been provided. We had a scheduled meeting on September 15th. No phone call, email, or notification was provided to the workgroup participants concerning cancellation. Dignity members and others were left to look at the schedule and find the date had been changed the morning before the 1 o'clock meeting. Many of the Dignity members have set aside time for the scheduled meeting, could not make the meeting the following Friday on the 25th. The quick turnaround even for this meeting was not convenient for many, so many Dignity members will not be able to attend. Many concerned citizens have taken time to provide comments addressing concerns about staffing ratios, and some have even provided survey results containing the top concerns from medical staff with their regard to their inability to provide care due to understaffing and reasons why many are leaving the field. In our last meeting, we were provided with potential recommendations, and many of the individuals feel like who made written comments are concerned that they're being ignored. So I know that these timed 2-minute comments are not up for discussion, but if you could please address this issue or at least let me know where minutes can be accessed, that would be wonderful. Thank you. And just so you know, when they click on the minutes link on the link that we were given, there are none posted ever.
All right. Thank you for your comments, Ms. Kukich. Next up on deck, as I said, is Ms. Hines, Erin Hines, and then the next person signed up after her is Susan Hines. So, Ms. Hines, Erin Hines, excuse me, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. I've reset the timer on the screen, so whenever you're ready.
Okay. I'm ready. Hi, my name is Erin Hines. I'm a member of Dignity, and I'm a CNA. As a CNA, I have been disappointed that the retention aspect of the workforce issue has been largely dismissed. We have spent many hours talking about recruitment, from volunteer programs, recruiting from military personnel, opportunities for the visually and hearing impaired, helping nurses through school, etc. I definitely realize how important it is to recruit in order to have the numbers we need. However, if we do not fix the issues at the back end that our current workforce is having to deal with right now, then how are we supposed to keep everyone that we want to bring into this profession? They will just end up leaving the workforce also. Many CNAs are either leaving or are considering leaving because of the extremely low wages, burnout, the physical toll this job takes on our bodies, and a lack of appreciation from administration. All of these issues lead CNAs to feel very underappreciated and not respected for the amount of work we do. I realize that CNA wages have been included in the recommendations, and I sincerely hope that that moves forward. As far as burnout from understaffing, I seriously believe we need to mandate ratios and/or hours of care per day in order to give our CNAs a job that is actually physically possible and gives our residents the care and dignity they deserve. If facilities do not have the workforce in order to adequately care for their residents, then they need to only take in the number of residents that they can properly care for. As for there being a feeling of underappreciation in our facilities, we need administration and those in leadership to change the climate in our facilities, to promote appreciation, teamwork, good communication, and respect between administration, nurses, CNAs, etc. By listening to many CNAs, this is a huge issue. If we do not take a serious look at improving retention, what good is our...
All right. Thank you, Ms. Erin Hines, and I know you and Ms. Susan Hines are sharing the same line. So, Ms. Susan Hines, are you ready?
Yes.
All right.
Hi, my name is Susan Hines. I'm also with Dignity for the Aged, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to be a part of this work group and appreciate the time everyone has invested in this process. These are my thoughts on our problem and what I see as the solution. We have thousands of elderly folks who need to be well cared for. We have many who are not because of obvious understaffing and poor pay for CNAs. Erin Hines' research has borne this out, that the top two reasons CNAs leave their job is because of low pay and understaffing. We have 90 facilities in Virginia, which are on the watch list. This means we have thousands of elderly people who are at risk today as we are meeting. How long are we going to allow this to continue? I feel that there should be a requirement that all legislators who are in a decision-making position on this issue should be required to live in one of these at-risk facilities for a week before they vote on this issue. We have not invested all of this time into this work group because of the good facilities. The only reason we are having to meet on this issue is because we have some very bad facilities. Basically, we need to pay CNAs a respectable living wage for the hard job they do and mandate ratios or hours of care. For some reason, in our 21st century world, we cannot figure out how to make this happen. This issue has come up for 16 years now, and it makes me sad that we're still working on this. So if we are serious about taking care of the elderly in our facilities, there are those capable of coming up with a solution to this. If we fix that end of the problem, the CNA pay and mandates, It's a little creative advertising. The pipeline end would fix itself.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Susan Hines.
Thank you.
And with that, Dr. Pratt, that does conclude the public comment period. And if you all will give me one moment, I will flip this back to the PowerPoint presentation. Okay. We should be back to the PowerPoint presentation. And Heather Anderson from the VDH Office of Health Equity wanted to let everyone know that she's on the call, but she was having some issues unmuting her line during the roll call. All right, Dr. Pratt?
I am still waiting to see the next slide. It's still on the public comment period.
All right,
there you
ready?
go.
All right.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Allen will be reviewing how the work group will decide upon recommendations for inclusion in the report to the General Assembly and for the timeline for drafting the report. Ms. Allen?
All right. As we've discussed at the meeting that we had on Friday and the one prior to that one, each stakeholder, by which I mean each organization or agency, is going to get one vote per recommendation. Within your organization or agency, you are free to come up with whatever your organization or agency's position is going to be. It could be you all have a select group that makes the decision. Maybe you poll all your members. It's entirely up to you how you decide what your position is going to, your agency or organization's position is going to be. But either way, it's going to be one vote per recommendation per stakeholder. What we are discussing today is not what gets the up-down vote for inclusion into the report. This is how the recommendations are going to be written and how they're going to appear on the ballot that you guys are going to vote on. And as a reminder, you get the vote of either you support it, you oppose it, or you abstain and you don't have a position essentially on it. If you do indicate that you are opposed when you do vote on it, you will be given the opportunity to explain why your organization or agency is in opposition to a particular recommendation. But just as a reminder, what you're getting ready to see is just a pickup from the conversation that we had started on Friday on the recommendations that you all are going to be voting on for inclusion, not the ones that are directly going into the report. So with that being said, the recommendations that we got through last week, we got 1 through 13. Based on the discussion that we had, during the meeting itself, we've made revisions to the service learning recommendation language. The potential recommendations 4 and 5 were taken out. Those were about the quote-unquote appropriate supervision that would accompany volunteerism or service learning in the nursing homes, because there were alternative recommendations in the list that were more detailed as to what appropriate supervision was, and that was suggested that we take those 2 out since they seemed very duplicative. There was a new recommendation added for a general financial relief program, one that was not specific to child care, one that was not specific to transportation costs. And then towards the end of the meeting, when we were talking about the regional living wages, we had in there that it was increase the wages for CNAs, proportional to regional living standards, and the discussion that we had at that time, which Megan Green sort of kicked off, was it going to be specific to just CNAs, or was it going to be an increase to minimum wage across the board, and the political headwinds that one proposal versus the other might run into. So based on that discussion, 2 recommendations were added so that it's a general minimum wage increase rather than one that is just specific for CNAs. The CNA one is still in there, but it's not, there's also a general one now as well, okay? So 1, 2, and 3, these were the ones that were about the service learning that we modified. You may recall we had the Word document up and we were wordsmithing it together. Then we had...
I just want to interject. I'm sorry, this is Sam Kukich. I don't know if anybody saw, but I submitted a document that talked about, I know we were talking about some of the specifics of what we can include in those, what service learning was. And so if you look at one of the documents that was sent in last night, I sent in last week, it talked about how it would be authentic, intentional, how it would connect with curriculum, be reflective, have an impact, and be applicable. So those would be more defined terms to use in there if you need the specifics.
Okay. In the interest of time, I would like to pick up where we left off.
No, I understand.
So that we do. Right.
I'm just trying to interrupt. I'm just saying if anybody else is interested, I did submit a document on that, and it was the Fairfax model, just in case anybody would like to see it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying go backwards, really.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure we're all on the same page that we definitely need to get through the full. We need to get through the whole list today. So, but thank you. Yes, I did include the comments that you had sent in, including the service learning one, in the email to the work group this morning. So, as I was saying, 1, 2, and 3 are the, if I can get the slide to advance, are the service learning ones. 4 and 5 of the ones that's in this stack right here, these are the ones that had the more explicit minimum requirements of what appropriate supervision was going to entail for either service learning or the volunteerism. There's the outreach programs, the funding for both this advanced certification for CNAs upon conclusion of the pilot program, and the funding of that nursing scholarship and loan repayment fund that presently is not funded at all, and expanding the eligibility of the nurse loan repayment program, also known as Mary Marshall Nursing Scholarship, to include CNAs, which it currently does not. Then this is the financial relief program. So there is this still has parents and guardians in it. I do apologize. So my apologies, 10 and 11 should say direct care nursing home employees and who are parents and guardians needs to be taken out. So I do apologize. That language will be taken out. Let me see if I can get this to strike through. I'm not sure if anyone can see the strike-throughs. Are those showing up for you all? They are? Okay. So that language would come off. I do apologize. That should have been taken off. Okay, so 10 and 11, those were the ones that were there before child care and transportation costs. And then 12 was the general one that we discussed that was more of the cost of living financial relief programs, which could include child care, dependent care, but it could also include other things that the General Assembly could designate. And then we started talking about as I said, the living wages. So the first two, those were the ones that were specific to just CNAs. And then based on the discussion that we had with Megan Green, 15 and 16 have been added here, and they are just minimum wage across the board. Again, it's the regional living wage standards. One's United for Alice project, aggregated according to the local workforce board region, and the other one is the MIT living wage calculator, aggregated according to that same regionalization. Okay, and this is where we stopped last time. We started the discussion, but we ran right up to the end of the blocked off time, so we had to cut the discussion off. So 17 and 18, they are very similar to the ones that are on the next page, 19 and 20, and I'll explain what the difference is between them. I apologize for having to split them across a slide. They're just so long they wouldn't all fit. So 17 and 18 is rebasing Medicaid reimbursement rates annually. Both of them are annual, based on the regionalized living wage standards. 17 is going to be your United for Alice data. 18 is going to be the MIT one instead. And in addition to that rebasing, it's tied to a mandate that the rate increases are going to be passed on to direct care workers by a wage pass-through program. And you all may recall that when we were discussing this last time around, it was mentioned that a wage pass-through program like this has actually been attempted in the past in 99 or 2000 thereabouts. And that was ultimately discontinued in part because DMAS, the Department of Medical Assistance Services, was experiencing some difficulty in in administering the program because it was requiring them to audit 100% of facilities as opposed to like randomized audits. So that, again, that sort of implementation issue would be one that I've no doubt CMS would chime in with if this were a proposal adopted by the general, well, if it was a proposal voted on, approved by this work group, and also then adopted by the General Assembly, I have no doubt DMAS would pipe in about either having it be randomized or alternatively giving them the discretion to make it randomized. But that is, I did want to let you know that we did have something like that similarly in Virginia before. So it has been attempted, and it was the burden to the agency and the oversight of it that was what led to its demise, because it required a 100% audit of the facilities. So, just, you know, and then, like I said, these are very similar to the ones on 19 and 20. The only difference between 19 and 20 and 17 and 18 is that the rebasing of the Medicaid reimbursement rate for these two, 19 and 20, are triennially versus annually. Because right now, DMAS rates are rebased on a triennial basis. So 19 and 20 would tie the rebasing to the schedule that they're doing it on right now. That is the only difference between 17 and 18 versus 19 and 20. So, any thoughts on these rebasing ones? Please let me know. This is the time to hop in.
So it's happening now annually, and when you say triannually, what part of the year would that happen, or would that be one every 3 years or 3 times a year? How are we talking about that?
So it's happening triennially right now, not annually. So it's triennially. So the difference, so the pros of doing it triennially is that's what DMAS is already doing, and when they rebase their rates, that's the schedule that they're on. My understanding is that the rebasing is tied to the federal fiscal year. So it's once every 3 years. There's going to be a rebasing based on the federal fiscal year because of there's a sharing of Medicaid costs between the state and the Fed. So my understanding is it's based on the federal fiscal year for that reason. So that's the pros of doing it the triennial way. And again, all of these options can still be on the ballot. I'm just explaining why there's the two versions. The pros of doing it the annual way is that cost of living goes up every year. It might be a small amount, but it does inch up from year to year. And by having it annually rebased to accommodate for regionalized living wage standards, it makes the rate more responsive to the living situations people find themselves in right now. Whereas, let's say, like the economy, for example, like the bottom falls out of the economy because of some public health crisis and like living standards are all over the place. If you're on that triennial cycle for the rebasing, you may not, the Medicaid rate may not be responsive to that because the bottom falling out of the economy may not hit at the same time that triennial rebase happens.
Right, and last time you were talking, you said that I was asking you why the rates were so low, and you said it was because the Medicare rates didn't account for inflation and they didn't catch up, if you will. So that would kind of prevent that problem if it was annually versus triannually, correct?
So there is some accounting for inflation now. Back in 2099, there was not. I don't know if we have any DMAS folks on the line. I'm not seeing anyone. Let me scroll down real quick. When they did their presentation for us about how the Medicaid rates are calculated, inflation is something that they take into account. But inflation, there's your general consumer price index inflation, and then there's the medical inflation costs that are, it's typically medical inflation is a little bit higher than your just regular CPI inflation. So without having them here, I don't know which inflation metric they're using. But inflation alone isn't necessarily going to address your regionalized living standards. The CPI is not going to be broken down into discrete enough data to be tied to like the specific regions in Virginia, for example. I think at most it would be at the state level, but I mean, as we all know, like the cost of living out in Lee County in far southwest Virginia is going to be way different than the cost of living in Alexandria.
Right. I guess I was just saying, because you said the difference was triannually or annually, and I'm just saying that wouldn't it be to the advantage of workers to have it annually?
I mean, that certainly could be an argument that's to be made. The reason why I have both options here is just one of them is recognizing one's probably a little bit more advantageous to the workers, and one of them is more in terms of burden to the state in having to rebase the Medicaid rate, that the triennial one would be on the schedule that they're already on, so it may be easier to implement. That's why they're so odd. I'm sorry?
Yeah. I guess I just have a heart for the CNAs, and anything that gives them an advantage, I really want to give them, because they're taking it in the shorts. Sorry, but they are. So it just makes sense. If we can help them, we should stick with the, I would like to stick with the rate that helps them the most. Right.
Well, and that's why, I mean, it's kind of getting back to like why we have the various models of service learning as options. The reason why I'm giving more than one option on the rebasing and on several of these options, but the reason why there's multiple options is it may be, for example, that the annual rebasing doesn't get a majority of support, but the triennial ones do. So that way, at least the triennial rebasing, which is still based on regionalized living wage standards, does make it into the report. That's why I'm trying to give a broad enough scope of options so that if we shoot down collectively as a group, like it doesn't get the majority, it doesn't completely foreclose the possibility that a rebase rate recommendation shows up.
Right, I understand that. Good, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so not hearing anything about needing to rewrite or re-wordsmith 17, 18, 19, or 20. So 21 and 22, these are very similar. One is a pay for performance program. That's a lot of P's there. Through DMAS, again, this is going to be through Medicaid, to provide additional reimbursement to facilities meeting minimum staff to resident ratios with such threshold ratios for additional reimbursement increasing every biennium for 3 biennia. So that's 6 years. And then 22, like I said, very similar, same concept, but instead of it being staff to resident ratios, it is instead minimum hours of nursing care per resident. Same sort of scaling up over once a biennia, every 3 biennia. So that's going to be a 6-year span of time. And the reason why I went with that scaling is if you look at the staffing ratio bills that we have seen in the General Assembly over the past couple of years, that's usually how they're structured, is that a certain, depending on if it's staff to resident or minimum nursing hours, or hours of nursing care, I should say, it's usually for the first biennium, it's this, and then it tiers up every so often. So since that seems to be a common way of doing it, that's why I chose it for these. But if you all want to see alternatives included that don't include the sort of tiering up, I, of course, would be happy to entertain any suggestions on this. Like I said, this is the recommendations that's going to appear on your ballot. It's not necessarily the recommendations that will end up in the report because we have to vote on it. But just want to put these out here since. Go ahead. Ms. Kukich, was that you?
Somebody else said hello first.
Hi, this is Dana Parsons with Leading Age Virginia. I guess I have some concerns that 21 and 22 are not written broadly enough, meaning that I understand the pay for performance program to provide additional reimbursement to facilities meeting minimum staff to resident ratios, but I think that there needs to be some other language there, unless we're going to, what I mean by broader language, if we're going to flesh it out later, if that recommendation were to pass. But just because you have more staff doesn't mean you're providing quality care. So I think that there should be some language out there to assess that the community is actually providing enhanced, that the quality of care is a result.
So am I hearing you correctly, Dana, that for 21 and 22, you would like to see that the pay for performance is additional reimbursement for meeting minimum staff to resident or hours of nursing care, plus a quality metric?
I'd like to look at that, because I'm all for more staff, but I don't want money funneled to communities that have more staff that necessarily aren't providing quality care. So I just think that we need to flesh that out a little bit more.
Dana, can I ask you a question? This is Sam Kukic. What do you mean by that, if you don't mind me asking? If you have the right amount of staff who are able to care for residents, why wouldn't the proper care be available?
I don't think that you can say that just because you have extra staff, there's automatically going to be enhanced quality of care. I know that we certainly support more staff and need more staff, but I think that we should put some extra parameters around that to make sure that quality care is actually being provided. So we tried pay for performance in Virginia a long time ago. We worked with DMAS to try to get this off the ground. So I think that we could revive the work that we did there. I'm not trying to stand in the way of this at all. I think it's very important. I just want to make sure that community is meeting this particular ratio is actually providing quality care. I know STARS, the STAR system is very subjective, but would you want to send funding to a community that's meeting whatever it is your minimum staff to resident ratio is, and they have a 1 star?
I guess my question to you is, I think you're getting in the weeds for me. I'm not there. I'm in the part where I'm saying, okay, so if it says additional reimbursement to facilities meeting minimum staff to ratios, I mean, that's not over an abundance. To me, if that's minimum staff, and that's where I'm confused. If you have the minimum staff, I don't understand why that would be overstaffed, or why that wouldn't determine the care would be appropriate for or needed care. Why that wouldn't provide for needed care if at least you had the minimum staff.
Rebecca, you said you would use tiers that was in the proposed legislation prior?
So I was looking at prior sessions bills. So some of them were the ratio, some of them were the hours of care devoted per resident. And the ones that I looked at, they were tiered up. So these are not the numbers. I'm not saying these are the numbers. I'm just using this as an example. So like for the first biennium, it was like 3 hours of direct nursing care. The next biennium is 3.5. The one after that, it was 4. So that's what I had used as the structure here. I think maybe to clarify Dana's point about not wanting to give folks money if they're not providing quality of care. So particularly for 21, because that is just staff to resident ratio. That doesn't say the staff you're hiring is necessarily providing the care. I think you're going to, I think the concern that Dana might be having, and let me know if this is not what you're trying to get at, Dana, but if the minimum staff to student, or staff, I keep saying student, I'm so sorry, staff to resident ratio is, let's say, 1 staff member per 10 residents, and I know, I can get that.
Wireless. The wireless customer you called is not available at this time. Please try your call again later. Announcement 1, switch 170-2.
Hang on a second.
Welcome to Verizon Wireless. The wire.
Okay. I don't know what happened. I do apologize. What I was trying to say is that in the staffing ratio situation where it's, let's say, 1 staff member per 10 residents, hypothetically, that you don't want a situation where someone's like, oh, well, I'll get extra money for my facility if I just hit this ratio, and they hire the folks who meet the minimum qualifications irrespective of whether they, actually do a good job at providing care or are, you just don't want like a rotating door going through there of like lower quality candidates being hired just so that they can meet the minimum staffing ratio, for example. I think that maybe is what Dana was getting at.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Rebecca. I guess to really be able to answer Sam's question is I'd actually have to see what staffing ratios we would be putting forward. It's not a one-size-fits-all field, and so I would really need to see what the standards, were. But I appreciate your comments, Rebecca, to clarify.
Right. So I guess so I'm hearing two things. One is Dana's interested in seeing a recommendation that is additional reimbursement, that is staffing ratios or nursing hours, whichever, plus a quality of care metric that they're hitting while also meeting whatever staffing ratio or minimum hours of care. And then I'm also hearing an interest in having what those ratios or hours would be actually explicitly stated in the recommendation. Is that correct, what I'm picking up?
I don't know if they would need to be explicitly stated in the ratio in the recommendation. I'm not really sure, Rebecca. I need to think more about that. I would definitely want to see what we're considering. But yeah, I think you really hit it with the first part of it. I don't know. I have to think some more on this. So if I could reserve my right to speak once I've given this some more consideration.
Right. And again, kind of getting back to my point about like giving you all multiple versions of a general concept or idea about a recommendation is that, again, let's say this pay for performance at staffing ratios alone doesn't make it, but the one that's pay for performance, staffing ratios plus quality of care makes it, at least that there's that pay for performance and there's that component in there, even if it's not like the specific one that is 21 or the specific one that is, and it could be that the ones that are quality of care don't make it in. I'm just saying, I'm fine adding additional recommendations in there. Is there a particular quality metric that we want to identify or just say?
I have a question.
Not, yes.
In that regard. So this isn't my specialty field except as a consumer.
Mm-hmm.
But when you hire a CNA, don't they have to have passed, have done something, have the qualifications to be a CNA? So you wouldn't just get anybody in there. If you're going to hire someone, they have to be qualified, right?
So I've personally never run a nursing home, so I can't answer that. But I mean, the CNA that you get from DHP, that says that they have met the minimum standards to be a, certified nursing assistant. That doesn't necessarily mean they're like the top 10%. But I will defer to the folks who are on the call who actually do run nursing homes to answer that question.
Well, this is Vivian. The education and them passing the exam gives them the certification, and they can go and work in a nursing home with just, completing their exam.
Mm-hmm.
There's no prerequisite that they have worked in the nursing, as a caregiver before, but some of the nursing homes may have that as part of their criteria, but it's not, if you pass the exam, then you can go and work as a CNA.
But does that make you, I mean, obviously you've got to have qualifications. I'm not trying to get argumentative. I'm just kind of trying to understand. So if I ran a nursing home and I had 10 new CNAs, some of them had worked 10 years in a nursing home and some had not been at all. Of course, you're going to have the variation on experience, but they would still all be qualified at one level to be equal, just not, and so how do you determine level of experience? So would you still consider that you had qualified CNAs even if you had new ones? What would give you that, when you're talking about additional reimbursement for facilities meeting a minimum staff to resident ratio, I would still think if they were, if they had passed the test and they knew what quality care was and you hired them, because why would you hire somebody who wasn't, that you would meet that staff to resident ratio and be eligible. So what would determine that wouldn't meet that?
And so I think that was the point that Dana was getting at. So if it's just a staff to resident ratio in 21, for example, all that you would have to do is hire someone who has gotten their CNA, which, the Board of Nursing is here and as is Dr. McDaniel, who can expand on what all those qualifications are. But, there's a certain list of things that they have to have in order to be a CNA. And if they meet those minimum qualifications, whatever they happen to be, from Board of Nursing, and they get their CNA, then yes, they would they would go towards meeting that minimum staff to resident ratio. Like they would count towards that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they have the experience to be providing the best quality of care. It doesn't necessarily mean that they have that they're a good personality fit. Like maybe they have their CNA, but it's not the thing they really love doing, and it shows in their work. That's entirely possible. The closest analogy I can give you is, I don't have a health professional credential or anything like that, but I've got my law degree. Someone who goes and applies to be admitted to the bar, passes the bar exam, they can go that very next day and start arguing like the big cases, handling a big criminal prosecution. They could, but do you necessarily want them to do that? So I guess that's where Dana was going with like the quality of care thing. It's like, yeah, on paper, absolutely, they are legally able to do all the things.
Right.
But there's also an experience element to it.
Yeah, Rebecca, I appreciate that. I think I would like to suggest that 21 and 22 have a quality component that would be determined, added to it. And then I also, while thinking about this, wondered if we want to have pay for performance for communities that employ advanced CNAs. So allowing for some funding either to provide for the advanced CNA program or are employing those. We could work on, talking about that, but I know that a prior recommendation was to provide tuition for advanced CNAs, and as we get this program off the ground, it just seems like pay for performance would be a good fit for pay for performance.
Hi, this is Susan Hines. I think what I'm hearing, if I'm understanding this right, Dana, is even if you had, let's say, 6-to-1 ratio and a facility was still getting strikes on their record, you would like to have some list of things that would keep them from getting this additional reimbursement. Is that what you're saying?
It's not that I don't want to prevent them from getting the additional reimbursement. I just think that meeting minimum staff to resident ratios may not be as much of an incentive. We'd want to have a quality component to it to make sure that the quality is improving alongside meeting the staff to resident ratio. Because just because we're employing a certain number of CNAs doesn't mean that we're also ensuring quality of care. So I want to make sure that we have accountability for that.
I was going to say, Dean, I totally concur with that. I think to me that's been the missing element in that there are a lot of CNAs out there, but once they take their exam and have their education, what are you going to tell them? You know, I mean, if they don't have the right attitude, they don't know how to change that. So where's that criteria at?
Right. I hear what you're saying, and this is called pay for performance. And so if all you have to do to perform is to hire a certain number of staff, I just think we're not reaching what we want to, which is overall quality of care. And so I don't think we can arrive today at how to assess that. I mean, the star rating is one option. I think that the recommendation would need to include that would have to be determined, you know, through the development of this program.
Hi, this is Erin Hines. Yeah, as a CNA, I agree. I think the quality component is important, not just to have the bodies, because you see the weak CNAs, you see the strong CNAs, and so I think quality is a big component of this.
Okay, this is Rebecca again. I'm going to, similar to what we did last time, throw a Word document on the screen to see if I've tweaked the recommendation in line with what we've been discussing. So if you'll just give me one moment. Hopefully you will see a Word document now.
And Rebecca, can you read what you're writing?
Yes, absolutely. So I have copy and pasted over the bullet points that we had, or not bullet points, the ones that we had on the screen for 21 and 22. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the very first one is similar to 21. So it says pay for performance program through DMAS to provide additional reimbursement to facilities meeting minimum staff to resident ratios and meeting minimum quality of care standards determined by DMAS, with such threshold ratios for additional reimbursement increasing every biennium for 3 biennia. The next bullet point says pay for performance program through DMAS to provide additional reimbursement to facilities meeting minimum hours of nursing care per resident and meeting minimum quality of care standards determined by DMAS, with such threshold hours for additional reimbursement increasing every biennium for 3 biennia. And then this last bullet point is based off of what Dana had said about the CNAs, advanced CNAs, excuse me. Pay for performance program through DMAS to provide additional reimbursement to facilities employing a minimum number of advanced CNAs based on resident census and meeting minimum quality of care standards determined by DMAS. I don't know if I nailed the advanced CNA thing, because I don't think we'd want to say you have to have at least one, when one could be hired at a facility with 50 residents and one could be hired at a resident with 500 residents. I don't know. Yeah.
I think you hit it perfectly with this language.
Okay. And as resident, resident census for everyone on the call is the number of residents you've actually got there. Do we want to say quarterly, annually? Because, I mean, it can't be on a daily basis. That's going to be a problem to to administer. So it needs to be on some sort of time frame. Average annually, average quarterly, average, what's half a year? Not biannually. Biannually. There we go. Any thoughts?
I wonder if that would be worked out by
DMAS?
Yeah, leave that up to DMAS.
Okay. Yeah, we can leave it at that. Anyone else on the call? Okay.
I guess this is Judy. I guess I maybe have some questions that perhaps relate to these two and maybe don't. And I'm not sure. I'm just trying to wrap my head around all of it. But when we talk about advanced CNAs, I'm thinking, of course, obviously I'm coming from the disability perspective, and I'm thinking, you know, I'm hitting 60 in March, and, you know, who knows? You know, I may be in a nursing home in 20 years. I may be in a nursing home in 5 years. But as a person who's blind, I don't want somebody doing to me and for me when all they, you know, when maybe perhaps they need some training, and I'm not sure. I know this is talking about payment and how we're going to, you know, how they're going to get paid, but I think we need to perhaps define advanced CNA and define the kind of training that they're going to be given. Again, just because you take a test doesn't a CNA make.
I hope you're.
So this is Charlotte Rada with the Board of Nursing. There is a definition of advanced CNA, and that is a different certification in addition to a certified nursing assistant. So that is defined in regulation with criteria and the qualifications and for additional education and other additional requirements that are needed to meet the advanced CNA certification.
Okay. And does that advanced certification or even the beginning one, does it deal with how to deal with individuals who come into the nursing home facilities who have disabilities, and does it deal with giving them, you know, does it talk about dignity and that kind of thing? Because I know when I've walked in to nursing homes to do teaching, I know that that's not happening.
Well, it is, all of those points are included within the curriculum for a basic certified, for a basic nurse aid education program. The curriculum is available on the Board of Nursing's website. If anyone wants to look at all of the specifics that a nurse aid education program must include in their education preparation. But those things that you mentioned are definitely in there. Sorry, Vivian.
No, that's okay. I'm sorry. And to piggyback on what Charlotte is saying, in order to become an advanced certified nurse aide, you must have worked at least 3 years. You must have at least 3 years of certification history as a certified nurse aide. And then you have to get a recommendation from a nurse, and that person should have supervised you at least 6 months. Before recommending you for the advanced CNA status.
Okay.
And you have to, the curriculum, am I correct, Charlotte?
Yes, and that's all laid out in regulation, and all of those points are there. Not only do you have to be certified for at least 3 years, no other previous disciplinary actions within a preceding 5 years, and you have to have had that recommendation from someone who has supervised you for at least 6 months. And additionally, to all of those, you must complete the advanced nurse aid curriculum, which is a minimum of 120 hours of advanced training by an approved program, which does include the competency evaluation.
I have a question for you. Do most average CNAs know this process? Erin, I'd like to ask you, do you know about this?
Well, I was just wondering, this is Erin, are there many facilities that are hiring advanced CNAs or move CNAs from just the regular CNA to advanced CNAs? Because I haven't heard much about it.
Yeah, this is Dana Parsons with Leading Age Virginia, and we obtained a grant, a CMP grant, to develop the curriculum for the Advanced CNA program, and we recently launched a website. Blue Ridge Community College is administering the program for us. The tuition is at no cost for 10 students over 3 semesters. And I've included the link for our program in the chat box. It had to be delayed as a result of COVID, but it's starting back up next year. And so we're really excited about it. And if you want more information, you can contact me, and I can give that to you. But everything is on this website if you want to check that out.
In conjunction with that, then, I think it's wonderful that you're doing that, but does your average CNA know about this progression? Or does like a motivational thing for them to know that, hey, you know what, I want to be a part of it? Well known.
So as part of our grant, we are marketing this. Our association is getting information out about the program to all nursing homes in Virginia, and we're educating them about it. And so that was one of the purposes of our website, so that CNAs can go to it and see what the program is, what it focuses on through the curriculum, how their nursing home, they could work with their nursing home that they are employed to apply to attend the course at no charge. So that is what we're working on, and why I'm sharing it now is another opportunity to get the message out.
And also, most of the nurse aid instructors discuss that. It used to be part of the curriculum. I don't know if it's still that way. Is it, Charlotte? But we always tell the students about the advanced certified nurse aid.
That's wonderful.
And Leading Age Virginia would be willing to provide a presentation on the program at a future call if anyone would like that.
So this is Charlotte again. So there are some advanced nurse aid programs that have been approved and in existence for many years, but there has not always been a great interest in pursuing the advanced certified nurse aides, just because many facilities were not hiring the advanced nurse aide. But with Leading Age's grant and renewed interest within the past couple of years, there is renewed interest, and looks like we'll be able to, increase our numbers of advanced nurse aides in the near future.
The barriers to moving forward with this is that nursing homes are going to have to pay them an increased wage. And, what that is, we do not know at this time, but I think that has been one of the barriers. So the pay for performance, it would fit very well with that.
Right. This is Erin Hines again. I was just, that's really kind of what I was getting at, is our facilities going to be willing to hire CNAs, and if that is something that comes open very often.
I think based on the fact that advanced CNAs are going to receive so much training on mentorship, that it's really going to be a very valuable program, and we've had a lot of renewed interest since we've been working with this grant. So we are hopeful, that this will really start to pick up in communities. COVID delayed us, so we'll get the program going again, the educational component with Blue Ridge Community College next year. So I just encourage everybody to check out the website that's in the chat box.
And also keep in mind that these CNAs are usually already working for a facility. So, I just hope that, I'm pretty confident that with the program that you have, that many of the administrators and the powers that be will accept it and start promoting it more.
Yeah, I agree. And so all of the applicants for this this first semester that had to be delayed, they were all CNAs that were currently working in nursing homes, and all of the administrators were very supportive of sending them to the program. There is a component that's virtual as well. So, yeah, we're hoping that we'll still have that same support for this upcoming semester.
Let me know if there's anything I can do for you.
Thanks. I'll shoot you an email. Thank you.
All right. So we had the tweaks to the pay for performance and on 21 and 22. Also want to let you all know that Ms. Barbara Seymour was able to join the call, who's from DMAS, but I don't see her. She's chatting me, but I do not see her in the, oh, there she is. Okay, Ms. Seymour, I've made you a panelist. You were on my attendees list, so you weren't probably able to unmute yourself. You should be able to unmute yourself now. You there? Yes, you are. All right, excellent. Okay, so since we've covered the 4 that are on this slide, moving on to the next slide, 23 through 27. So the 23 is creating a, hello?
Becca, sorry, this is Susan Hines again. Can I go back to one thing in the
on this
slide
slide or the prior one?
The one before. Are we recommending a minimum staff to resident ratio?
You mean in 21 or?
Yes, in 21 or 20.
Numbers. So I don't have the specific numbers in here. If there is an interest in having specific numbers, I would, again, with the idea of having variation, I'd recommend you have what 21 is just minimum, and the numbers get hashed out through the legislative process. And if you want a more specific one, you can have that in there. I would just, in terms of whether there should be a specific number here or not, I mean, we can certainly have that conversation, but I would recommend that you have one that's a little bit more general that doesn't have those numbers specifically as an option.
Well, okay, in the reading that we've done, it looks like 6 or 7 to 1 or 4 hours is really high quality care. So I was just wondering how we were handling that. Thank you.
Right. Yep.
Or ask you, Susan and Aaron, you know, 6 to 1, everyone I've talked to said, no way. I mean, the last place my mother-in-law was at, it was 6 to 1, which was great. We had no concerns at all. However, in the effort that Rebecca is trying to make this flexible, if you will, I would think even 10 to 1 would be a wonderful, wonderful thing. So I'm asking everyone, what do you think of just even putting a minimum of 10 to 1 versus right now they have 20 or 30? I mean, I just have to throw that out there.
I like the idea of having a recommendation because of that very reason, because so many CNAs are so doing an impossible task, and I think that would be a good move.
I would really vote that we work that out, looking at the legislation that's been introduced prior regarding staffing ratios, and then provide that information at a later time if the recommendation is approved.
Dana,
right.
Is that you, Dana? Who just said that?
Yes, that's me.
It was.
Okay. I got your voice down now. I guess the only reason I keep bringing this up is because if they haven't been able to pass one for 16 years, I just feel like you got to start with a number somewhere. And I know that this is a meeting and a work group, and you know it's not immediate for any of us, but I meet the people that it is immediate for, and I'm thinking, I don't know how much longer. I mean, a lot of them are just dying daily, okay, and a lot of them don't have the care. So part of me says, boy, can we just put a word in for them and make it a ratio? Because what are we waiting for? Because they just keep dying. They don't have enough people to care for them. So, I mean, even if you said 20 to 1, at least we'd have something. It wouldn't be 21 anymore. And do you see what I'm saying? Aaron,
I hear what you're saying. I just think we need more data to arrive at a number. It's not a one size fits all, and I'm just uncomfortable with throwing out a number just to get a number in.
Something about that.
Yes, this is Lionel DeCure with Dignity for the Aged. The Consumer Voice did a study with several doctors and everything, and they had their information on the Consumer Voice website where they addressed just the issue of staffing ratios. One of them was in regards to RNs, and then they talked thoroughly about what it should be through their studies and research for CNAs, and they came up it should be between 5 and 7, dependent upon the condition of the residents, but no more than 7. And in conjunction with that, I've sent several times a list of the 3 or 4 different websites, and it was never given to the group. And one of them was this Consumer Voice research. So is there a way that we could send that I've sent several times for the whole panel to be able to read what those researchers are saying?
I think you can put it right here on the chat, Lionel. You can put the link up there. But you know, you bring up a really good point, Lionel, because I think I've got more than enough research. I have dug up so much. I've got files, and this isn't even my profession. And I'm thinking, I don't know how much more research you need. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic. I am just saying, you know, if you look at all the stuff we've looked at, it's screaming at us. I mean, there are nurses marched on D.C., nurses in Philadelphia. Everybody is talking about ratios. So I don't know how much more research we can do. And I'm just passionate about this, okay? But it's true.
Yeah, I definitely can appreciate the passion here. I guess I'm just nervous about putting a number in without us giving, you know, some more thoughtful discussion to that other than this discussion we're having now.
But if you had the data from me and from Lionel, and we sent that, we just give it to everybody. We could put that on here. We have tons of documentation, tons of research. I mean, we're swimming in it.
1 second. I'm getting a couple of different people messaging me individually inside of the chat box saying that they're having difficulty unmuting themselves. Barbara Seymour, can you test your audio, please? Folks are trying to jump into the conversation we're having, and they just can't. Okay, I don't hear Barbara, so I'll have to do manual mute. April, are you there? April Payne?
Can you all hear me?
Yes. Okay, I'm going to try and get Barbara's audio fixed now, too.
Okay. So I want to jump in here. One, I echo the passion that I'm hearing right now. I actually think this is probably some of the more productive conversation that we've had. I think the problem with the research is that there is not, and Dana just said this, and I was trying to chime in several times this conversation, but the one-size-fits-all does not work. And I know, Sam, you have a lot of experience, several different facilities, and I think that you can probably appreciate where we're coming from when we say one size doesn't fit all, is that every facility is different, but even each facility being different, our resident demographic changes frequently. And I think what's really important is we need to focus more on ensuring that we're able to provide care and we're providing the care for the acuity of that individual at that time, which can change also week to week, right? So we might even have to change some of our staffing models, 1 week to the next, depending upon our residents that we currently have, any new admissions that we have, even our residents who have maybe a decline or they improve, in that amount of time that we're going to spend with them. I think that the challenge with staffing and it really comes from figuring out what that number per person, per their acuity level, their diagnosis, their needs. How do we, directly correlate that with the number of hours that we need to identify as that minimum staffing? And then the second point is once we put a minimum staffing in place, so, in Virginia, it's very heavily weighed upon, our resident demographic, the acuity level that we have. But if we put the minimum in place, does that become the standard for everybody? And if that becomes the standard, does that then not allow us to have a little bit of flex in the sense that our residents will have, again, weeks or months that they need that additional assistance? And then when we directly, put that impact on our Medicaid reimbursement system, because that obviously is what is it's over 60% of our reimbursement here in the state of Virginia. How do we correlate those dollars with that level of care? So I think there's more factors. That's why I very much do agree with Dana saying, I think this conversation, while it's extremely productive, and I think that we should continue this work, and I think there are other work groups that have stemmed recently. I think that there's way deeper kind of roots to it that we need to look at and we need to really focus on. And I know all the other states that have staffing ratios. I can tell you that not that they are not the be all and end all, and they have their own issues within. So I think where we always say, Virginia, we want us to be leaders. I think this is an opportunity for us to continue to work towards that. But I don't think that today we can say there's a prescriptive, 1 to 6, 1 to 8, 1 to 7, 1 to 5. I don't think that we're at that point that we can make that that recommendation. But I definitely agree that the passion is here and we should continue to push forward with it.
The cure with dignity for the age. You made a good point, and what you're saying is we can't make that decision. Well, we can't make that decision because I posted on there several times some of the research that has been done, and it's not being made available to the group. So you can't make a decision if you won't at least have the courtesy to post some of that research that's been done by some very outstanding individuals. I just don't understand what y'all are saying, to be honest, when you won't even post that information, or you won't post the minutes, or give us the email addresses. The minutes were promised to us during the very first meeting because I made a note of that, but we don't get that. And you surely don't post the information that I've sent you about the groups that like Nursing Home Compare, Nursing Families for Better Care, or Nursing Home Abuse Advocates, or the Consumer Voice. None of that was posted as I asked.
Just in conjunction with what Lionel just said, I feel like, we know for a fact Virginia comes in 36. We know that. That's documented. We have all the pay, and we've sent that to you. So we're not doing so hot. And, where I come from, I see people dying from UTIs. I see people dying because they fall. I see all the things that don't take a lot of care that people are dying from if they just had enough staff. So on one hand, I understand you want to get it all right, but our grade is a D now. Why not take a chance and give them some number that we can begin with? Because we're not doing any better on our own like this, just waiting. And if we can't pass a bill in 16 years, when are we going to take a chance and pass a bill and try it?
I'd like to add to that myself. As far as I know, we don't want to get tedious because I have seen some of these rules and laws that are passed that are very tedious depending on the acuity of a certain person. The way I see it is these are people. They're all people. They all need a certain amount of care, and they're not getting it now. And I feel like I agree with Sam that we need to do something to make this move forward and get us in a better place for our elderly.
are recommendations, and just like you're putting forth potential recommendations, I guess that's Dignity's input.
So, hang on a second. There's a lot of audio background noise. Okay. So, when it comes to the staffing ratio things, this is Rebecca, sorry, staffing ratio bills that we've had in the past, I will say that they have not, at least in, I'd say, the last 5 years at minimum, probably more, they have not been structured as pay for performance. That's not what the legislation has been. The legislation has been State Board of Health promulgate regulations that establish minimum staff to resident ratios or minimum hours of nursing care per resident, depending on which version the bill's going with. That is how the bills have been structured, and those bills, as evidenced by the fact that we're having this conversation right now, have not been successful. So if there is, since the mandate of this work group is to increase the availability of the workforce in nursing homes, 21 and 22 are aimed at that. It's incentivizing the 21 and 22, the revisions we made to them, are aimed at incentivizing the availability of the workforce. It's incentivizing the management to hire more CNAs, advanced CNAs, depending on which version you're looking at. The bills that we've had to date, the ones that are simply Board of Health, write the following regulations. Here's the minimum ratios, here's the minimum hours. Those do not incentivize, they don't positively incentivize folks to hire, because the thing is if they don't do as the regulations say, then there's a negative reinforcement there, and it doesn't do anything to increase the availability of the workforce, because again, as we've talked about through many of these meetings, the pipeline isn't there. We don't have the physical people there to hire. As we have discussed at length, there are wage and compensation issues. So if the idea is to just have staffing ratios stand alone by themselves with nothing attached to them like we've seen to date, which is basically Board of Health, write these regulations, I don't know necessarily that's going to be a successful recommendation. If you want to see it in here, that's why we're having this discussion right now, is trying to figure out what the potential slate of things to vote on is there. But it's been tried for 5 or more years, because I've got binders and binders of all the legislation that's come through that our office has had to keep track of and do fiscal impact statements for, and these come through every year, and they crash and burn every year. So I absolutely understand the desire to see staffing ratios or minimum staffing hours, but reconceptualizing them in a way that's perhaps a pay-for-performance concept might be a more successful vehicle going forward. And like I said, I'm fine with having something that is more specific, but I think it would also be wise for the group to have on its list of potentials to vote from would be the more general ones like you see here, where it's minimum staff to resident ratios, and the legislative process hammers out what those exact numbers are, because I've heard just a wide range in this conversation alone. From Mr. DeCure, it's been somewhere between 7 to 5 to 1. From Ms. Kukich, she was fine, all the way out somewhere between around like the 10 mark. So is that where you want to be at the end of this 3 biennial process, or is that where you want to be at the beginning? There's just such wide variation there. I think we could go round and round for quite some time as to the number and quantity of variations we could have on what is the starting point, what is the end point on both of these versions of either minimum hours or the staff to resident ratio. And I want to be as efficient with our time as possible because we still have another 10 recommendations to get through during this meeting. I'm happy to discuss further if you'd like to have something more definitive as an alternative, not taking 21 and 22 out or the CNA one that Dana had discussed earlier out. But I would like to get through what we have here and then circle back because time is ticking, both for this meeting and in terms of actually producing a working draft. I don't want people to feel rushed in both voting and in reviewing the draft because it's probably going to take us 4.5 hours just to nail down the potential recommendations. It's probably going to take at least that amount of time to review the draft report. So I want to be efficient with our time. So I'm going to move on to the remaining recommendations that we've got. And if time permits in this meeting, we will circle back to discuss more definitive numbers and maybe, again, in the interest of having an efficient use of time, convene a meeting that is just about numbers. But it's not going to be it's not going to be something that we're going to get through until we can get through the rest of these recommendations. Okay?
I'd like to make a recommendation that we put 10 to 1 in there just as a placeholder, just so we're not starting from zero again.
Are there any thoughts from the rest of the group about just doing a 10 to 1 variant on 21 that also has the minimum quality standards that we talked about?
Yes. I would
yes,
even. This is Judy. I would want to. Sorry, I would want to go 6 to 1 again as a placeholder. Again, I'm always at thinking about people with disabilities, and I don't care what you do, it's going to always take, if you're doing staff to resident, which I think is a better way to go than minimum hours. But when you've got a resident who is blind and maybe has now, because of age, some memory loss issues and things, it's going to take a little longer. And so if you've got 10 or 15 or 20 to 1, that staff member isn't going to have enough time. And so that's why I would recommend a 6 to 1.
I agree with 6 to 1. I'm just trying to be flexible. You know me.
No, I hear you. I just think for us to just have a starting place, I would recommend that we do 6 to 1. When you take in mind that you're going to have not just elderly people, but you're going to have elderly people with compromised health. You're going to have them with disabilities. You're going to have them with disabilities, compromised health, and cognition issues. So I think all of that, and I think you've got to be fair to the staff. Somebody like Erin, who's probably an excellent CNA, if she's got 20 people and she wants to work with somebody to show them how to run their remote on their television in their room or how to do their telephone, but she's got, 9 other people that she's got to see, as great as she is, she's going to be evaluated on her performance. And if she's not getting to everybody, then, she's going to end up paying the price. But if she has 6 to 1, she may be able to do things a little bit easier.
Right.
Well, I concur with you.
Hang on. I'm going to stop right here because this gets back to the exact same problem I kind of raised before. I don't know if this is your starting point for the biennium or if this is your end point. Is 6 to 1 the ultimate goal, in which case we need to back out several more biennia to tier up? Or if this is your starting point, then that's what I'm saying. I would like to have this numbers discussion at the end of this meeting after we get done with the remaining recommendations that we have. Because, again, time is something that we need to be mindful of, and writing the report is something that is not a one-week process. So,
Rebecca,
again, and I also have...
This is Waldo with Dignity for the Age. We'll take your word on that as far as I'm concerned. If your word is good, that we will get back to the numbers so we can move on. So you're saying we will get back to the number discussion?
Yes, we will get back to the numbers discussion. And the discussion we will be having, hang on, let me finish. And the numbers discussion we will be having is alternative writings of 21 and 22. So you're going to still have the general one on your ballot of just minimum.
You told me to hold on, but you didn't give me an opportunity to finish what I was saying. So also, will you be able to send out those 4 main websites that I sent out as far as research, and also let me know where the minutes are located?
Yes, sir. The 4 websites that you were talking about were already distributed to the work group back in August.
What I didn't send them till Tuesday, September the 1st, 2020 at 10:43. So I don't know how they could have been sent out in August. Maybe someone else sent them out, but I never got them.
The four websites you're talking about, you sent to me on August 15th. You copied Sam on it as well. Is Medicare.gov/nursinghomecompare, familiesforbettercare.com, nursinghomesabuseadvocate.com, and theconsumervoice.org, correct?
Did the rest of anyone else in the work group get those?
Vivine, I got them.
I guess my question is, what more research do you need? Because we have a ton of information. Lionel really has a ton of information.
I have another suggestion, Rebecca, if I could say something. This is Susan Hines. Is this, because this is such a critical part of this work group, is it possible to readdress this in totality at the meeting?
I'm sorry, in totality of what you cut out there?
Okay. Is it possible to readdress this at the next meeting and just spend a lot of time on it after we've had some time to think it through?
Like I said, I'm willing to once we get through the recommendations that we have right now, we can start talking about it today if you would like. I'm fine setting aside time once we get through what we have. But if you'd like it as a separate meeting, that's fine. I don't think it's a question of research at this moment. I think it is genuinely a question of just agreeing on what's going to be in the potential recommendation to be voted on. Because I'm hearing one thing from, I'm hearing 10-1 over here, 6-1 over here. I'm hearing over here a blanket ratio isn't the way to go because the one-size-fit-all doesn't fit all, essentially. So we can't, like I said, I have plenty of numbers and plenty of research, which the various folks on this work group have sent to us. But the problem's not the research. The problem is nailing down what numbers you want to see as alternatives to 21 and 22. So, like I said.
Sorry, this is Susan again. I was just thinking if we had a little time, North Dakota is doing really well with their hours of care, and maybe in the meantime we could find out why it's working there and not in other places. That was all I was thinking.
Okay. So I'm moving on to the next slide. I am hopeful that the remainder of what we have on the slides are not going to be anywhere as, I don't want to say controversial, but anywhere as won't generate quite so much conversation. So I do think we will have time in this meeting, but until I can move to the next slide, I'm not going to be able to get us further down this path. So I'm going to move to the next slide.
This is April. Somebody is off mute and we can't hear you. You're breaking up really bad from background sound, so if somebody could mute their line. Thanks.
Yes. Let me see if I can figure out what the noise is.
It looks like Lionel and Barbara. Those are the two that show up on my screen. Yeah, if you guys could mute, that'd be great because I really can't hear Rebecca at all.
Okay. I'm moving on to the next slide. I think we can get through the remaining 10, and then we can figure out what our game plan is going to be on having alternatives to 21 and 22. All right? So, 23. This is creating a workforce program similar to Virginia Values Veterans Program for people with disabilities to increase, this should be to increase, instead of increases, employment opportunities and promote economic development by training and certifying organizations in disability workforce best practices. Ms. Seymour, I'm going to have to mute you. There's too much banging in the background. Okay. If you need to unmute yourself to join the conversation, please feel free, but until that time, please keep your line muted. So are there any thoughts on 23? I know we had to, like I said, this is based off of what DVS is already doing with theirs, and it sounded like based on the conversations that we'd had with DBVI and VDDHH that there is not a similar program for people with disabilities, which forecloses in many ways the ability for them to join that clinical workforce. So any thoughts on 23? All right. 24, that's going to require changes to the nursing home regulations to permit care by non-credentialed individuals in the NMAC program. Many of these suggestions, I will note, actually came from DVS when they gave their presentation about ways that their program could be used to improve the clinical workforce. 25, that's going to be civilian credentialing and licensing reciprocity so that state regulatory bodies recognize civilian equivalency of certain military allied health specialties. And then 26 is civilian educational credits for statewide standardized recognition of military medical education and awarding of equivalent hours. Any thoughts on 25 and 26? Okay. And then 27, that was going to be funding for an awareness campaign for the MMAC program and the healthcare employment opportunities provided by the program, because there seemed to be, based on the conversations we had with DVS, a disconnect between what's available that can be taken advantage of right now and what's actually being utilized. So kind of getting to the point that we discussed with the advanced CNAs and who knows about the program, who's taking advantage of the program. Sometimes it's just a gap in the outreach. So this would be funding for the outreach. Any thoughts on what's on this slide? All right. So 28 is a state version of the federal work opportunity income tax credit for private sector businesses for hiring individuals who have consistently faced employment barriers to employment, to include TANF recipients, unemployed veterans, a veteran whose employee is on or his family is on public assistance, 18 to 39-year-old food stamp recipients, 18 to 39-year-old designated community residents, 17 or 16-year-old summer youths, vocational rehabilitation referrals, ex-felons not otherwise excluded by a criminal background check under 32.1-126.01, Social SSI recipients, rural renewal county residents, empowerment zone residents, and long-term unemployed folks. So that's folks who have been unemployed for greater than 26 weeks. Everything you see here under the bullet point, this is what the feds give the credit for. So I recognize this is quite a lengthy list. Do we want to have it be exactly what the feds do in terms of the qualified groups that would make an employer eligible for this? Do we want to cut it down and just leave it to the discretion of the General Assembly? A little bit of A, a little bit of B? Please let me know.
Now, the long-term care facilities?
I'm sorry?
Is this recommendation also for helping out at long-term care facilities?
By helping out, do you mean volunteering?
Yeah, well, however, it says state version of work opportunity tax credit. I'm just trying to figure out how it connects.
So the federal version of this requires actual hiring of the individuals. So it would be employment. It would not be volunteers, if that's what you're asking me.
Ex-felon. I have a problem with that. Well, why would we hire ex-felons to work at nursing homes?
So in Virginia, so this code citation that's listed there, 32.1-126.01, actually has in it a whole list of disqualifying crimes for which if you are convicted, they're considered barrier crimes, that person would not be eligible for compensated employment. So there is a barrier to employment, but it's not an exhaustive list. It's not literally everything for which you could have gotten a felony for. And I believe I'm pulling up the, if you'll give me one moment, pulling open the statute right now to see if I can get a better list for you. But it's quite a lengthy list, and if you look at the definition of barrier crime that they have, it's basically a million citations to a whole bunch of other statutes. So I can work on pulling out all of this. But if Dana or April Payne or anyone else from the industry wants to pipe in about when an ex-felon could be hired that's not otherwise prevented by barrier crime. Not hearing anything from them.
I guess, I look at what's happening in nursing homes now, and it's like, I just feel like we want to give them the leftovers of everything.
Well, like I said, this is based on the federal work tax credit. So I know, obviously, the work opportunity tax credit is available to any private business at the federal level. Our discussion here is obviously focused on nursing homes. So that's why I listed what all 10 of those things are at the federal level. So if we want to strike something out, we absolutely can. That's why I listed all of them.
I would say, this is Susan Hines again, as long as it's not a violent crime, if it's like something like tax evasion or something like that, I would definitely not want someone working in a nursing home if they've been convicted of some crime against someone.
Right, exactly.
I was trying to find my list, but I can't find it for the barrier crimes.
It's quite extensive.
I think, Rebecca, I think you may want, rather than ex-felon, you may just want to put a person that's not otherwise excluded as a result of a barrier crime, and then refer to the statute, because the statute is going to list everyone that's not the parameters for not being eligible to work in a nursing home.
And actually, the language also says any person.
Okay, but now you've got the code words in there. What are we really talking about here? Tell me what that means.
What, any person?
No, okay, so any person excluded by a criminal background check, is that what you're talking about then?
This is the section of the code that lists the barriers to employment. So if a person falls under this statute for committing one of these crimes in accordance with the statute, they would not be eligible to work in a nursing home.
Okay, I'm just saying I'm not aware of what those are. I don't know if people in the General Assembly, obviously they will be aware, but I would not agree to that not knowing what it is.
It's the same thing we use when we accept a nurse aide into the program. It's the same thing, and it's under. You can find it under Virginia.gov. The Virginia Code, Title 32.1. I think it's Chapter 5 and Section 32. So you can Google it and you will see that. But it's the same thing that we use when we accept them into the program.
Right. If you all give me a second, I will share the statute with you, and you'll understand why I say it's a little difficult to parse, but just one second. Okay, so you should see, whoa, goodness. You should see the Code of Virginia in front of you. So this is the statute I was referencing, the one that's specific to nursing homes. It talks about how they shall not hire for compensated employment persons who have been convicted of any offenses set forth in Clause I of the definition of barrier crime in 19.2-30 392.02. So if you go there, you'll see it is, hang on. They're saying anything in this list right here, this long, long list. This right here. Anyone who's been convicted of anything in here, any of these violations, they cannot be, they can't be employed by a nursing home for compensated employment, with very few exceptions. So like I said, this is quite an extensive list. This one, like 16.1, 253.2, right. Like that's violating a protective order, for example. There's a lot in here.
Yeah, I'm just not familiar, but now I am. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm fine with taking out ex-felon and just saying any person not otherwise excluded, which means it's going to be a person who doesn't have any of this, all of this. Like I said, it's an extensive list. And if you click on any of these hyperlinked statutes, it'll take you there, and you can see what the crime is that they're talking about. So this one is voluntary manslaughter, for example. Don't want any of those folks in there. Okay, so one second, let me flip back to the presentation. So I will fix the bullet point that's about ex-felon and just say any person instead. Are there any others in here that we want to either modify, take out, add in? In case you were wondering, on the last, or the second, the rural renewal county resident and the empowerment zone residents, I did pull that information when I put this slide together. So your rural renewal county resident, goodness, that's going to be your counties of Buchanan, Dickinson, Highland, and Lee, as well as the independent cities of Clifton, Forge, Covington, Norton, and Staunton. And then your empowerment zone residents are going to be folks in Norfolk and Portsmouth.
And how do they, when you say empowerment zone residents, what is that?
So an empowerment zone is something that the feds have come up with. So again, because this is based off of the federal tax credit, it's based off federal programs for these rural renewals. They are established by HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. They're the ones who establish the empowerment zones. So those are designated zones of high poverty and unemployment. So that's what an empowerment zone. And then the rural renewal counties, I don't believe that's HUD for that one. Trying to remember which, but all of those things are designated, like I said, at the federal level. So we would, if we kept those in here, we would have to, state government, the Department of Taxation, they would have to be the ones checking in on what those zones or counties happen to be in a given tax year. Whereas, I mean, we could take those out so that they wouldn't have to check back in with the feds. We'd also have to take out community resident, because a community resident means they're in a community that is either the empowerment zone or the rural renewal. Excuse me. Like I said, we can be very general and just leave these groups up to the GA if you all would prefer. But I wanted to show you what the feds were already using.
I'm going to say something that sounds really unkind, and I don't mean it to, but I'm going to say it. I'm not experienced in this area. I am experienced with nursing homes. 4 of the 5 nursing homes that my mother-in-law was in, and other people that I know, had problems with people stealing and other issues. And if you, I'm not saying this happens to everyone, but I'm saying if you have people who are ex-felons or who are, and I know you're going to take that word out of there, but empowerment zones where they're seeing things that, that are available to them that they haven't had before. I just saw a whole lot of theft. I saw a whole lot of things that I shouldn't have seen, and I was wondering why are these people doing this? And maybe some of them were from those zones, and I know that sounds terrible, but it's plausible.
This is Barbara. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
My preference, I think, rather than getting too in the weeds with all this, I think we ought to leave it more general. When I look at the involvement of so many things that we're recommending, I think the more recommendations, the more that's attached to each recommendation, it's going to decrease the likelihood of being looked at even more closely. So my personal preference would be to just let's make this more global and not spell out all these bullets.
Sure. So we could, after the comma from barriers to employment, after that comma there, instead of saying to include, and this is all listed, we can instead say comma as determined by the General Assembly. So the General Assembly would be the ones to determine what groups of individuals have consistently faced significant barriers to employment in Virginia. And just as a reminder, this tax credit would not in any way override the 126.01 barrier crimes requirement, just to make sure that's clear. It wouldn't override that. So just making it as determined by the GA, that wouldn't get rid of the barrier crime issue. So that still would be something that every applicant to a job would have to make sure that the licensed nursing home would have to make sure that they're not hiring folks who are barred because of criminal history. So are we okay with just striking all of this and just saying after the to include, just making it, instead of to include, just making it as determined by the General Assembly? Okay, someone speak up if you're not interested in seeing that, and I'll assume that the silence means that it's okay to make it just as determined by the General Assembly. Okay, I will make it as determined by the General Assembly then. Additional taxation, so there's the state income tax credit for CNAs. So this is not going to the nursing homes. This would be going to the CNAs, the LPNs, and the RNs who are working at licensed nursing homes and certified nursing facilities. So they would just get an income tax credit. Thoughts? Not hearing anything?
I'm for that. This is Susan Hines.
All right. And then on 30, this is an state income tax credit. This would go to the facilities, and this is for disabled access for-profit nursing homes. And the reason I say for-profit is because your not-for-profits do not have taxes. They don't have income taxes, to pay. So it would only be for the for-profit folks. There is a federal version of this disabled access credit, but the way that credit is written, the vast majority of nursing homes would not qualify for it. So this would enable them to improve disabled access for their employees. Again, hopefully widening the pool of folks who would join that clinical workforce. All right. Anything? Hearing none. The state tax relief program, this is going to be for your not-for-profits, since they don't have an equivalent to 30, that would allow them to offset part of their payroll tax, not all of it, for expenditures aimed at providing access to employees with disabilities. Okay. Now 32, this one came about as a part of the discussion that we had at our last meeting on Friday. And that was to direct the Joint Commission on Healthcare, the JCHC, to conduct a study on direct care, staffing, recruitment, and retention, workplace culture improvements, and internal leadership development in nursing homes. I believe that encapsulated what our discussion was, but if that is not the case, please let me know. And I will also note, even though Senator Kiggins is not on the call today, she is a member of the JCHC.
This is Carol Pratt, and in their meeting earlier today, the Joint Commission did talk about this very topic. So I would think that they would be at least inclined to take this under consideration.
Okay. Aside from the numbers issue that we talked about with 21 and 22, when it comes to staffing ratios or minimum hours of nursing care, are there any other recommendations that this work group would like to put on the slate here of things that they may vote from?
Ms. Barbara?
Yes.
I'm not trying to go back to the numbers, but unfortunately, since I had issues getting on, the numbers that are talking about rebasing Medicaid reimbursement, I think it was 17 and 18, 19 and 20.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm not, and even 21 and 22, I had reached out to our provider reimbursement division because I'm not sure that that would be the little I've gotten back anyway. For 21 and 22, that would be a huge regulatory venture. And I'm not sure what, when you say rebase, they weren't, it may have to be a conversation, Rebecca, that you have with some of our provider reimbursement staff. I'm not savvy with provider reimbursement, rate setting and that kind of thing. But, you know, they're for nursing facilities, the rates established are per diem. So the pay for performance, the rate system that the rates are established as a per diem, so they get a lump sum, based on the end of each year, so it's always like a year behind. So based on the intensity of care and that kind of thing, and through all the rugs and different mechanisms that are out there in place for nursing facilities to submit through CMS and eventually to us. So I just need you to know that I need to dig a little deeper into some of those. With those, I guess I'm not sure when you say rebase, what exactly you're meaning there.
So on the rebasing, it's the recalculations that they do on a triennial basis, which they're, according to DMAS's own website, is for 19 and 20, I should say. Right now, according to DMAS's website, about how they go about doing nursing facility rates, they say out there right now that they rebase them on a triennial basis. Okay. And I know you hopped on somewhere when we were talking about this slide, so I'm not sure what part of the conversation you may have missed that part. Okay, so I do apologize if this is a bit of a rehash for everyone else who's on the call, or if you heard part of this and I'm repeating myself. But the reason, the only difference between 17 and 18 and 19 and 20 is that 19 and 20 are triennial versus the annual that's on 17 and 18. And I certainly recognize, and I pointed this out to the group, that if the GA were, like if this gets into the report and if the GA were to adopt it, rebasing triennially, which is what you guys do already, according to your website, that it certainly would be quite the undertaking just to rebase it in this way, but at least it would be on the schedule that you guys are already on, by doing it on a triennial basis. So that's why I have 19 and 20 in here as triennials. So it matches up to the time period, the cycle that you guys are already on for rebasing. The reason why the annual one was floated as a suggestion for 17 and 18 is that the annual one would be more sensitive to changes in living wage standards. So that would be more pro employee but I also understand that would definitely be more burdensome to DMAS to be able to implement. But that's why I have both of those options there. Is one is, more administratively a little bit easier to administer. The other one is more burdensome to administer, but is more pro the direct care employees of nursing homes. So that's why there's the multiple options.
Okay. For the 19 and 20, so since we are doing it triannually and we're basing it on, and again, I'm out of my field a little bit on this, and perhaps we can have a side conversation just to get clarification, and then we can bring that back up when we do meet again, just so the folks, everybody's on the same page with what exactly that means. But you're talking about rebasing this reimbursement rate based on this, either the ALICE project or the Massachusetts calculator?
Yes, that the regional living wage standard, depending on which one, if either, whichever, is the select one, that living wage standard calculation by region be part of the rebasing calculations. Because I know there's other things that go into rebasing. I mean, there's there's just general inflation.
Yeah, I don't think they take into account all this. Okay, that helps me a little bit, at least follow up with my provider reimbursement folks. Thank you. Sorry.
I'd be happy to. Oh no, that's fine. I'd be happy to hop on a call with you and Sonia and was it Bill Lessard?
Yeah, Bill Lessard.
Yeah,
right.
Lessard, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a problem.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay. So before we get back to numbers on 21 and 22, is there anything else in terms of recommendations that this work group wants to see? I am not hearing anything.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excuse
me.
I'm
sorry, what?
Yeah, this is Sam Kikich.
Yes.
Are you talking about just recommendations outside of staff ratios, right?
Yes, outside of that.
Okay. I guess I don't know how to word this, okay, but a lot of the comments that people wrote in from Dignity, and there were a variety of them, talked about CNAs having injuries, CNAs not being able to take breaks, CNAs getting sick and not getting comp time. Well, how could we phrase that in there to provide for them? I mean, I think there's an element of, you're talking about the workforce. We're talking about how to keep it in, for example, some of the measures for example, the research paper here says, staff cuts appear to be the cause of declines in patient health after they're brought by private equity firms. So there's that element. I don't know if we can put anything in there about that, but they relate to non-compliance of federal guidelines on quality of care, facility infrastructure, managerial quality, patient rights, and nurse staffing compliance. So those are other things that we haven't addressed that really do include issues related to what we're talking about. Like what happens when you don't comply? With, so how do I say that?
Are you asking about yeah, what? Yeah, sorry, I'm getting stuttered there. When you say not comply, do you mean if a nursing facility does not comply with like the federal conditions of participation, or are you talking with state licensing laws? They're very similar in their overlap. But I just want to make sure I'm answering your question.
Well, quality of care would be one. Okay, the facility infrastructure, I've been in one where mold's growing all over the walls and nobody's done anything about it. Managerial quality, it's not run well. Patients' rights are not enforced. So it's sort of like they have all this stuff in documentation. Okay, it's there. It's just that they don't implement it. So, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. Go finish your sentence.
So I feel like we're trying to make recommendations, and they already have guidelines, but if they don't follow through on them, who is there to make sure they do? Because the CNAs, let me just give you an example, and you have a heart for the CNAs, and the reason I do is because they care for the people, okay? And I see people who are abused and neglected. So what happens is if the facility doesn't follow the federal guidelines on quality of care, or let's just say something as simple as patient rights, what do we do? What does the patient do? There's nothing they can do. How do we make sure that they actually do what they're supposed to do? What recommendation can we put in here to make sure that happens?
Well, you have to report. You have to report those things to CMS, and then they'll come in and do a survey.
Yeah, but you know, as wonderful as that sounds, I have done that, and what happens is a vicious cycle, because what happens is you make the report, they get it, then they tell you they get it, then 6 months later they tell you, yes, we're going to do an investigation in another 6 months, and then they do the investigation, and then they come back and say, yep, what you said is true. By this time, your loved one could have died. So I don't really call that adhering to guidelines or a solution for it.
Well, I've never worked in one where it took that long. I'm not saying that it didn't for you. I understand that. But I've never worked in one that took that long. And I've seen CMS come into a facility and take away a lot. Okay, so...
Well, I can honestly say I'm not bringing this up to cause problems. I'm bringing them up because it's real stuff that's really happened. And so what I'm saying is it doesn't give much hope for if something's non-compliant, the residents just live with it. Their rights are infringed on, but there's no way we can enforce them. And if you call the ombudsman, nothing happens there either. So what I'm saying is having it documented and actually implementing them are two different things. How do they comply with the federal guidelines on quality of care, on facility infrastructure, on managing? How do they do that? And how do we make them do that?
Okay, so there's a lot of questions there. Let me unpack it. She's absolutely correct. If there is something you or a resident observe in a facility that you believe violates either federal requirements or state requirements, there's a lot of overlap between the two of them. They're not identical, though. Then, yes, absolutely, a complaint needs to be filed because while we do have routine surveys that we go in and do and state licensure inspection. So when I say survey, I'm talking federal. When I say inspection, I'm talking state. So we do have routine inspections and surveys that we conduct through the Office of Licensure and Certification. We also do complaints as well. If something's happening in between the times we're coming in there for the routine surveys and inspections, but we're not being told about it, it's really hard for us to do anything about it because it's, you know, we're not physically there at the facility every day, and if no one's passing that information along to us, it's very difficult for us to do anything if we're not being told about it. So she is correct. You absolutely need to file complaints if you or residents are seeing something. Hang on, let me get through this. So when it comes to the federal complaints, CMS does triage them. CMS makes the final call on how a complaint gets triaged. The state makes, so CMS could hire its own surveyors, and they have sometimes when there's been just incredible need for it, like in the COVID-19 pandemic, where there's just so much need for infection control surveys. But most of the time, CMS contracts with state health departments to conduct the surveys on its behalf, and that is the case here in Virginia. So the same staff that we have conducting federal surveys are also conducting state inspections. So we get the complaint at the Department of Health. We recommend to CMS what we think the triage level is, but if CMS disagrees, CMS gets to make the call. And so you have various levels of immediacy in terms of how soon you've got to show up on, how soon the medical facilities inspectors have to show up on site. I mean, if it's an IJ, immediate jeopardy, obviously we're going to be there right away. If it's not an IJ, there's different levels of how soon we need to be there according to the triage level that CMS gives us. So, and we do both for your routine ones and for the complaint ones. The routine ones, we're obviously looking at all the conditions of participation when we go in there. Conditions of participation are the federal requirements they have to meet. When we go in for complaints, we're obviously going to look at whatever the complaint was about. And if we observe anything else in the facility at the time we're there doing the complaint inspection, that can be added to the survey report as other deficiencies that we may cite them for. Okay, so it's not just if you, for example, have a complaint about patient's rights, and we show up and, yeah, the patient right thing may or may not be true, but, you know, the ceiling's falling in because it got black mold all over the place. We're not gonna walk away from that. That's absolutely going in to the complaint survey report that gets written and transmitted to CMS. When we do, speaking on the federal side, when we do the federal surveys, complaint or routine, and we write them up and facilities get cited, we, other than plans of correction, okay, which is facility, you've messed something up, now it's time to fix it. Aside from that penalty, the other penalties outside of these COVID-19 times, those are ones that the state can recommend that CMS pursue. So it was really egregious. We said, you know, do a plan of correction, but also we recommend to CMS that there be civil monetary penalties. It's a recommendation to CMS. So the penalties that get handed down, other than plans of correction most of the time, it's going to be because CMS has decided to impose that penalty. The state, like I said, it can recommend, but it cannot force CMS to do to impose what it doesn't want to impose. So, like I said, the state has some role in that we can make a recommendation, but CMS is welcome to disagree with us on it, or go harder, go softer. That's CMS's call to make at the regional office level. So in terms of like, well, how do you make them do it? The best way I can say is if you see something wrong, you need to file a complaint with us so that we can follow up on it and either pursue it through the feds, which is usually the first route we go through, or through the state, because even sometimes complaints get filed and CMS will reject them, not because they're not legitimate concerns, but because they are not something that violates federal conditions of participation, which at that point, then we take it from a state level and see if it fits as a potential violation of state licensing laws. Because like I said, they're similar, they're not identical. So some things we mandate at the state level, CMS does not. But CMS always gets first bite at the apple. It's part of the agreement that we have with them as their state survey agency. But in terms of like how do you make the enforcement harder or more strict or anything like that, I'm not sure that it directly addresses the mandate of this work group. And also a lot of this is federal programs that we're talking about, and the state doesn't really have a lot that we can do to strong arm CMS. In terms of like on the state level, I mean, you could certainly strengthen the state licensing program, but again, that has a tenuous tie to increasing the availability of the clinical workforce in nursing homes. So if CNAs are being hurt or being injured on the job, those things, I mean, certainly file the complaint. I also think that might be a DOLI issue, Department of Labor and Industry issue at the state level if people are getting hurt on the job. It might also be a state licensing issue or a federal issue through the survey process, but I also think there are other agencies as well that might have something to say about folks getting hurt on the job. But I don't work for DOLI, so I don't want to speak for DOLI and what their jurisdiction is.
Did you also include OSHA?
Yes, OSHA too. And I think, I mean, for questions about DOLI and OSHA, I would reach out to DOLI because I would be surprised if they didn't have contacts at OSHA who could also be linked up to answer those questions.
Okay.
This is Barbara.
Mm-hmm.
If we can go back to forward, I guess, to number 23. I did have a chance to talk with Dr. Elward, who's also at DMAS and as a physician there. Number 23, creating a workforce, his suggestion was after we say people with disabilities, yes, with clinical experience is what one of the comments he had, maybe to make it clear that that these individuals, these veterans, are the ones. I mean, under the MMAC, they would be people with clinical experience, but I didn't know if we should spell that out in number 23 or not.
Yeah, I'm fine with adding with clinical experience to 23, because that does dial it in a little tighter to what the work group is about. Does anyone have an issue with adding people with disabilities with clinical experience to 23?
I think that's perfect.
All right. Yes, I will add that in. Okay.
All right. And one other comment. Will the General Assembly know what MMAC is and these programs that are referencing? Or is the report going to break down or define what some of these are?
Yes. So for the report itself, I'm going to use as a model the COP. Sorry, I was going to throw another acronym at you. The Certificate of Public Need report that my office did 2-3 years ago. And basically the way that report is structured is there's the table of contents, executive summary of what's in the document, just a rehash of like a 30,000-foot view of like we met on these days.
Right.
We did this report. And then it goes into sort of the background of the problem, the reason why the work group's been convened. And then it goes into the recommendations. And within each recommendation, there's like the top line summary of what the recommendation is. So, for example, creating the workforce program similar to better. And then underneath it, there's a fuller explanation of what that all entails.
Okay.
So that they have the top line view. So it's like, oh, I just need to look. I can't remember what was recommendation 23, and they can flip to it and be like, oh, it's that. But if they need more information, they can continue to read further, and it expands upon what that program is. And of course, any acronyms that we would use in there, any acronyms that we would use in there would be explained the first time they're used. And depending on how prolific they are, it may be that we even have like a little appendix in the back that's like, here's what all the acronyms mean in case you, you're like 50 pages. I'm not saying it's going to be 50 pages. Let's say you're like 55 pages in and this acronym pops up and the first time we used it was back on page 2, but you didn't read page 2 because you flipped to page, 55 and started reading. I can see the value of having an appendix in the back that says, here's what everything
that makes
says.
me feel better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. So I don't hear anything about additional recommendation. Well, no, I take that back. Sorry, a little scatterbrained. So, Ms. Kukich, are you looking to put in a recommendation that's about enforcement of this or any of the other recommendations that we have?
Well, like I said, from a lot of the people who wrote in who are CNAs, and when I asked them and told them that their opinion would be valuable, they had comments like, there's no consequence for work ethic. There's no consequences when they don't follow the rules. There's no consequences. So, how do we help them? There's no consequences when they get hurt. There's no consequences when they get sick. They just, they lose their job for calling in.
So for your first point about there's no consequences for them getting hurt. Again, getting hurt on the job sort of things, that's, like I said, that's DALI, OSHA. There might be a licensing or federal certification piece to it, but unless a complaint's filed, there's either with us, DALI, OSHA, whomever, there's no way we're going to be able to even begin to make that call. So the first thing I would say is they need to file complaints when these things start to happen. To your other point about the leave, the sick leave, being fired for calling out, things like that, I think that might be an easier swing to connect it to clinical workforce availability, because if the benefits are stingy, it's not encouraging to folks to get into the workforce and then stay in the workforce when they're there. So I think a recommendation regarding leave might be something. I mean, certainly we've seen with COVID-19 and the like, the push for more generous leave policies, especially in regards to sick leave and the like. That might be a recommendation to add in as well. So I guess I think this might come down to a similar issue that Ms. Green brought up last time when we were talking about wages for CNAs versus wages for everybody, it may be an easier swing to say that, let me flip back to the one that's about wages so I can see how I wrote it. So it would be something like guaranteed sick leave, for example. I'm not sure how much you'd want to, like, I don't know how many hours we want to say the guaranteed sick leave is, but like guaranteed sick leave for like all full-time employees, for example. Or even, I mean, I guess you could do it for part-time, but I've typically only seen that for full-time employees.
Well,
so would that be something you'd be interested in putting in here?
Yeah, I guess, Erin, you're a CNA. Do you have that already or what?
I'm sorry.
Guaranteed sick leave.
Oh, we have a certain amount, right.
Okay, so you do have that already.
Where I am.
Okay.
So if you don't mind me asking, Ms. Hines, the facility that you work at now, is it the only facility you've worked at, or have you worked at multiple during your career?
This is the first. I've just been about 2 years now.
Okay. So, and the reason I was asking is if you'd worked at multiple, my follow-up was going to be, or two or more, I should say, but my follow-up was going to be like, what was the variation in sick leave between facilities? Like if, you know, one facility is like, oh yeah, you get, I don't know, a pot of 70 hours a year to pull from for sick leave versus like another facility that says you get 10.
Right. So I'm
wondering what
I'm not real familiar with the differences between facilities. Mm-hmm.
Rebecca?
I'm sorry, who is this?
It's Vivine.
Yes.
I think if you're full-time, most people get sick leave, and they get the same sick leave that others get, and, you know, it goes by your tenure, you know, how long you've been there. So I don't remember any of the facilities that I worked in, and I've worked in several, that they did not get sick leave if they were full-time.
Right. I think what I was referring to, one of the CNAs who wrote in had her working on a COVID call, and then they made her go on 2 weeks, what do you call it? Isolation. Leave? Yeah. And they didn't pay her for that. And, you know, that was her work. That's why she was there.
So is it the quarantine piece of it specifically, or is it sick leave writ large?
Well, she's, this is a specific situation. I'm just saying, she said I'm sick, awaiting results of my COVID test. I come to work and find out my work will not pay me sick leave while I wait for the results. They said use PTO, and she doesn't have any. So that means she can't get paid until she gets the results of her COVID.
Right. I wonder if Dana or April or even Tyler Cox, if he was able to join us, are on the line. I know there were several bills in session, and they were not ones that my office was tasked with tracking because that sort of subject is not one of paid quarantine leave or something similar. Is not one that really falls into my office's bucket. Do you know if any of those have made it out of the General Assembly, or if they've all died in committee? Do you all have any idea?
This is Dana Parsons. I would ask Alicia Cundiff if she's on. I believe the workman's comp bill died.
Okay.
Yeah, Alicia, did you have any recent updates? That legislation did not move forward. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. There were two bills, one in the Senate and one in the House, that were both getting at paid sick leave in relation. They were specifically drafted in relation to COVID-19, and both of them didn't make it out. But I think that there's going to be further discussion in the regular session in January on that issue.
Thanks, Alicia.
Okay, thank you. Having not seen the bills, was it leave for public health emergencies or leave for public health emergencies related to COVID-19? Because I've seen both in several bills, depending on what version I'm looking at.
Yeah, I think both of them were specific to COVID-19, but I can check real quick and then I can just comment in the chat box to confirm for you all.
All right, that sounds good.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Yeah, like I said, those aren't bills that were on my slate of ones to keep an eye on, so I didn't know. I knew they were there, I just didn't track them at all. Okay, I'm trying to brainstorm how we would write a recommendation that would address the issue. I mean, we could certainly do one that is COVID specific. There's always that option to crib sort of what's been attempted, seems not to have been successful, but might be taken up again in regular session come January. Or if there's a way to draft it more broadly, that is like if you, by virtue of being, I'm trying to think how I would say this. Because COVID-19, I mean, it's a communicable disease of public health threat. So, I mean, you cough on someone, you sneeze on someone, like you could give them a potentially fatal disease. And I don't want to draw it so narrowly that if we have some other weird disease that comes along that's not spread in that manner, but it's still an issue, and you always have to worry about exposure of your staff, and sometimes your staff might have to isolate themselves or quarantine themselves because of potential exposure because you don't have the test results back. I'm trying to think how to address that without writing it too narrowly.
Yeah, let me go through some of my dialogue here with the CNAs, and I can send you an email. Let me think about that, and I'll send you an email on how I can say it better so that maybe you can write it better. Yeah,
like I said, I've seen for actually writing legislation, a lot of times there's just a really fine line between not just legislation, literally anything in when it comes to state agencies. There's a really fine line between you've drawn it too narrowly and you've not given yourself enough flexibility to address unforeseen situations versus you've written it so broad it could go 6 different ways. So that's why I'm just trying to make sure that, and again, it might be like our other ones, we just have like a couple versions of it and everyone gets to pick which one or ones that they like. But I do think that having that as a employee protection would, I think, give comfort to existing folks in the workforce and those looking to join the workforce that they're not going to be in a situation where it feels like they're being punished for having done their job, having potentially been exposed to an infectious agent on the job, and then having to sit out and burn time when it's not like they were going around licking handrails or anything, Right.
Well, you know what? I would rather talk about the time since we have time for that now and get back to you on that other issue, if that's all right.
Yes, that is fine. Okay. So as to, let me hop forward one slide. Nope, 2 slides. Okay. And I just sent, Alicia shared with me, I just sent to everyone in the chat if you have access to it. It's HB 5116, and that one is specific to COVID-19. And then Alicia has also shared with me SB 5076, and 5076 is the broader one. So we'll have 2 that we can look at. So like I said, it's HB 5116, that's the specific to COVID one, and then the SB 5076, which is broader because it is about state of emergencies involving a public health crisis of a communicable disease, which includes COVID, not limited to COVID. Okay.
Rebecca.
Yes.
It's Levine. It's going to be hard to create, the language, because it's no way for you to know whether the person developed COVID, contracted COVID when they were in that facility, or whether they contracted COVID in the community. And I have seen at least 2 cases. I know about 2 cases where the person went out and the CNA was out having fun at a party and then posted it on Facebook. And then she came back to the facility and spread it, and it spread to several of her coworkers and a patient. So you will have to be very selective with your language for that.
Yes, and I would, again, I would defer to, or I would rely on April Payne and Dana to answer this question. But if someone has a positive diagnosis, they've gotten the test, they are diagnosed with having contracted COVID-19, that at that point, I would imagine the employee could utilize sick leave. It wouldn't be, unless, because every employer is different. There's some employers, there is no such thing as sick leave. Everything is just PTO, and you use it how you want.
Yeah, that's true. If they have sick leave, they would use that, and when that runs out, then they would use PTO. Right. Or, like you said, in other places, it's just PTO, period, and they use that. But I will tell you now that most of them will not have it available because they have so many issues with, like if they have children having to take time off, or if, and when they're sick, a lot of times when the children are sick, they become ill. And so, they use it up, unfortunately. So.
Yes, I guess the concept would be that it's a separate bucket that doesn't pull from your, depending on how your employer has it, either sick leave or PTO or whatever, that it's just, because under the CARES Act, at least, in state government, there was if a state employee got COVID-19, there's a separate bucket of leave that is for that specifically, and which didn't pull from your sick leave or your annual. Now, if you needed more than what they gave you from that CARES Act, then you'd have to pull from the additional buckets, but you'd at least get an allotment of leave that was not pulling from either of them. But like I said, that was a state employee thing, so.
Right, and that includes even if it was someone in the state, that if you contracted it there, when that 14 days run out, that's it.
Yep. That is true. Yeah, but I will, in addition to looking at the bills that Alicia kind of has shared with us, I'm actually going to go and pull the DHRM, the Department of Human Resources Management. Yeah, Department of Human Resources Management policy, because that might give us some language we could use as a base of here's a bucket of leave that doesn't pull from this or that, and this is how it gets used. That might be a good place to look for some model language, since I know DHRM had a policy about it when this came out for state employees. Okay.
Rebecca?
I don't know who this is. Yes?
This is Carol. The most recent Virginia Healthcare Workforce Data Center survey of 30,000 CNAs indicate that 53% of them have paid sick leave.
Okay.
Just FYI.
Is that, if Dr. Carter's still in line, does that include, Dr. Carter and Dr. Pratt, the 53% that you're referencing there, is the base number full-time CNAs or all CNAs?
I believe it's based on FTEs.
I'm sorry, Dr. Carter. If you're trying to speak, I cannot hear you at all.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Yes. It's a response rate from all CNAs.
From all CNAs. So,
but again, 53% probably is most likely those people that are working full time. I don't think anybody who works part time gets leave.
Yeah, that was part of my question as to what the denominator was, because if it's every CNA that responds, you have some part-timers in there who would be answering no, not because their employer doesn't give paid leave at all for sick leave. It's just that they're not eligible for it because they're part-time. Okay. All right. Okay. So to the numbers on 21 and 22. I'm trying to think how best to do this. So I guess my question to the group, and this is going to be true for 21 and 22, is when picking a number, so let's say the 10-to-1 that Ms. Kukich threw out earlier, is that the start? Like, I guess that's my question. Is if we're going to throw a number in here, is the number we're going to throw in the starting number or the target end number at the end of year 3 biennial? Because I was getting very turned around by that discussion last time around. So I think we all need to be on the same page as to if we put a number in, are we saying it's the starter or it's the end point?
Can you hear me? This is Sam
yes.
again. Okay, so this is just me. Everybody else, please jump in with your ideas. Since we have no established ratios, 0, okay, and you can have 20, 30, or 40 residents, 10 would be a prize, okay? Ideal was what my mother-in-law had, which was 6-to-1. But I think we're asking for too much saying 6-to-1 because that we have nothing now. 10 would be a good beginning point. If we can get better, great. And if we end up there, that's great because it's a lot better than what we have. That's my.
This is Erin with Dignity. I would agree that we need something, and probably 10 is a good starting point since it's been hard to get anything passed in this previously. I mean, I just think about my day yesterday. I had 18 people to take care of, and more than half of them were incontinent. There were 5 or 6 that either needed to be fed or needed assistance with feeding. Tons of vitals, tons of blood sugars. I mean, it's impossible. It's physically impossible to keep up with 18 people and give them quality care that they need. So I think that is a good starting point. I agree.
And you've had 36 at times, correct?
There have been a few times where it's been more. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so kind of.
This is Lionel DeCure with Dignity. For the age, I think 10 would be great, but I know what's going to happen is that if you say 10, they're going to come back with a counter offer and make it 15 or 20. And that's why I would go between 1 and 6, because that has been proven in the past and there's been a lot of research on that number. Sure, if we get 10, that'll be fine, but I know people are going to come back to GA or even if it would be done and change your 10 to 15, 20 or whatever. And in the end, it's going to be up to the administrators of each nursing home to really enforce that and do that. That's just my thoughts.
So in saying 6-to-1, that I want to make sure I understand you correctly. You want that to be the starting? Because it sounded like you said based on the research that you saw that 6-to-1 was ideal. So is that your starter, or is that where you want it to end up in over the course of 3 biennia?
It should be 6-to-1 if you're going to do it. 10 is
as your
too much.
Point?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out. What's the end and what's the beginning? Because, it sounds like from Ms. Kukich, the 10-to-1 is her starter, where it sounds like from you, the 6-to-1 is the end. That's why I'm trying to make sure that when we're talking numbers, we're talking the same starting point and or the same end point. Like we have the same. When you say 6-to-1, that you mean really the end point, and when like Ms. Kukich says 10-to-1, she doesn't mean the end point; she means the starting point. That's what I'm trying to kind of get my hands around.
Yeah,
and
I guess.
Ms. Hines is.
Well, yes, this is Amy again, and I mean 6, yes, of course, would be wonderful. If that could possibly happen. But yeah, like I said, anything would be great right now.
And I think we're talking 3 years, right? So at the end, this is Susan, sorry. At the end of 3 years, it would be ideal if we could have 6-to-1 or 4 hours per resident of care per day.
So as a correction, it's not 3 years, it's 3 biennia. So you're looking at 6. Because that's how it's been tiered. Like I said, I went back and looked at our old legislation that had been filed in prior years, and it's over a 6-year period. So it's the ones that were like State Board of Health promulgate the following. regulations, it was here's what you do in 2021, here's what you do in 2023, here's what you do in 2025. That's 2 biennia. And that's what I have in the recommendation. So just to clarify, it's not 3 years, it's 3 biennia.
Oh,
to
gotcha.
Erin's, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. And then to Erin's earlier point about the care that she had been providing, the folks that, I think you said, over half of them were incontinent, for example. And I think that point goes to the point that April was making earlier about the one-size-fits-all issue, which is there in the current federal requirements, and in a sort of broad stroke sort of way about your staffing should be based on the acuity of the resident. So I'm wondering, in saying, again, we can have as many variants as we want of this in the potential ballot here. In the setting what the minimum staffing ratio is, if you have a low acuity facility, would you want the staffing ratio to be X, and then in a medium it's Y, and in a high it's Z? This is your tiers, and then that just advances. All 3 of the tiers would advance as you move through the different biennia. And is that something you all would be interested in? Would that sort of?
If I could say something here, when you talk acuity, I've seen people die from getting out of bed. I mean, there was nothing wrong. They just stumbled and fell because there was no one there. It wasn't that their illness was so serious. And so when you talk acuity, it's not like not all these people are on oxygen and doing all these things. They just need basic care. Someone to get, my mother-in-law was dehydrated and got a UTI because nobody gave her water. It wasn't anything serious that she needed, but you still need those people to provide that care. And it may not be something serious.
Well, and if I could jump in about things that we've heard, I think Sam may have shared this with us, that they were waking her mother-in-law up at 4:30 in the morning because they couldn't get to everyone. Well, I don't want to be treated like that when I'm old. So if for no other reason, then they don't have to be waking up at 4:30 to eat breakfast.
Or take a shower. That was shower time. Shower.
If you have that on your care plan, they should not ever wake a patient, a resident up at 4:30 in the morning unless that resident and the resident's family member said that is the time that they want to be awakened, and you put that on the care plan and see if it's on the care plan, that's your leverage, because you can then go back and say, well, this was not on the care plan, and then,
But we would never have approved that, never. We would never have approved it. Matter of fact,
that's what I'm saying.
A nurse came in at 7. He said, sure. I said, well, when did you get here? He said 7. I said, well, what time did you shower? Oh, that's before me. I'm thinking, so it just became a process of elimination. Like, when did you shower her? Oh, it's 4:30. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of that stuff that goes on just so they can get the jobs done. I mean, people aren't people, they're jobs.
So that's not a matter of acuity, it's just a matter of numbers.
This is Dana Parsons of Leading Age Virginia. I think that it's really important to have the Office of Licensure and Certification. I don't, Kim and that team also to weigh in on this topic. I wonder if you may consider adding to this, because it seems that we might not be able to arrive at an answer for you to implement here, that would be determined what the staffing ratio would be. Just adding some language.
For it to be determined through the regulatory process?
Yep.
So is our experience for offering not valid?
Well, I'm sorry, what?
I said,
I didn't catch that.
The experience that we're telling you about, and and also Erin's experience as a CNA, are these not considered valid enough?
I don't think anyone was disputing the validity of what
well, then
Erin
why
said.
don't we have enough information?
I'm sorry, what?
Then why don't we have enough information to make a decision?
A decision on the numbers to put into the potential recommendation?
Yes.
Well, it sounded like 10 to 1 was your proposed starting, and Lionel DeCure's proposed end was 6 to 1.
I only said 10 to 1 because I didn't think anybody would agree to 6 to 1, and I want them to have something versus nothing.
So do you not want me to put the? I guess I'm.
Yeah, put 6 to 1. I would totally concur with that. That's what it should be. But
as the end point or the starting point again.
Okay, so I thought you had to be specific on this. When you say starting point, I don't know what that means.
Okay, so where it says with such threshold ratios for additional reimbursement, increasing every biennium for 3 biennia. The way it's written right now, DMAS or it would be DMAS, yeah. DMAS would be the one setting what the ratio is, the minimum ratios, and then what the additional reimbursement is going to be under this pay for performance program. So they would be the ones setting the ratio. The discretion would be given to DMAS to set that.
If it had to be 6 years, if it had to be 6 years is what you're saying, right? Then it starts.
I mean, it doesn't.
Isn't that what you said?
Well, it doesn't have to be 6 years. I just picked this as a model because that's what the prior staffing ratio bills have been using. It seemed to be to be honest, it makes sense to graduate it in because if you go for right out of the gate 6 to 1, I don't think anyone's going to be able to meet it. In which case the program falls flat on its face, and after it doesn't get utilized over a certain period of time, DMAS is going to just see to, I mean, there's no point of having programs around that people aren't going to be using, so it would be phased out. Whereas if you have a tiered approach, and it does not have to be 6 years. Like I said, I just picked what we had in prior legislation that's come through. If you have a tiered approach, it's easier to ease people into the program.
Okay, and so
okay.
Using that idea, okay. So would you have all right? And okay. So let's start with 12, and then next year it's 10, and then next year it's 8, and then next year it's 6. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, you could do it like that. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, if that's the way we could ease into the program, that's what I think we should do. Erin, what do you think?
I think that would be a good idea. I think that would help a lot. And I understand that it would be better to do it that way to work into it since we do need more workforce anyway. So if that's the way we could get it done, then that would be an option.
Plus, in the meantime, we're going to need to be doing advertising, showing all these young people how great the pay is and how great the ratios are going to be.
Well, that does give them something to look forward to. I think that is good. So however you say 12, 10, 8, 6, that's what I think would be a great idea.
8, 6. Okay. So that, I'm trying to think how I'd write that. Yes. Okay. So I'm working on this right now. So that gives us a specific number alternative to 21. Now my question is for 22, because we've been talking the 6 to 1, 2 to 1, all that. What are the numbers? What is the specific number alternative to 22? Because we haven't really touched that one nearly as much as we've touched staffing ratios.
So are we talking like Erin, did you say 4 hours per resident was what?
This is Susan. North Dakota is 4 hours per resident. I think it's like specifically 3.96 hours per resident, and they're doing really well.
Well, it's a lot better than the less than 2 that are the 90 homes on the watch list for Virginia. So what are the stats on, I mean, Dr. McDaniel, do you have an idea on what's happening now?
Were you asking?
What the hours are. We were talking about ratios before, and now we're talking about minimum hours per resident.
I know what they tried to get passed years ago back was 4. So I'm not sure right now what it is. But it was 4 before.
Well, I think that's a good beginning. Good beginning and see if they do it.
Yeah, if I can find. I think last year's bill that we had was staffing ratios. I don't think it was hours. Let me check.
No, this was a while ago, in the early 2000s, actually.
That's not it. Hang on. It's easier to go through these binders if I actually have the physical binders in front of me as opposed to, flipping through a million pages. Okay, so I take that back. Last year's bill was hours. So it started at 3.5 and worked itself up to 4.1. Hang on, I'm trying to read this. It's all pretty dense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, this is spread out over several biennia. So hang on a second, I gotta rewrite this. Oh no, come back. Excuse me. I wanna make sure I flash this on the screen so you all can see it. And I apologize, I don't know why it's saying, it's got the wrong numbers on it, but that's okay. Like 1920, okay. Beginning at...
Hey, Rebecca, would you want to make the staffing hours a separate recommendation just so it wouldn't interfere with any of the other aspects of 21 and 22 moving forward in case that issue wasn't supported by all?
Right. So 21 and 22, as y'all may recall. So the only changes to 21 and 22 is we added in there that not only do you have to meet the threshold hours ratio, whatever, you also have to meet minimum quality of care standards. And then there are going to be alternative versions of 21 and 22 included on the ballot that will have explicit numbers included. And I think I have them written to incorporate what we have discussed, but just give me a second and I will share the screen. My screen. Okay. Goodness, I can't see anything. Okay, so the first one here is your ratios. Oh, no, it's not ratios, meaning to resident ratios. Sorry about that. Okay, so this one is going to be meeting minimum staff to resident ratios and, again, still the quality of care issue, as determined by DMAS with such threshold ratios for additional reimbursement beginning at 12 to 1 and increasing to 6 to 1 over 4 biennia, because that's what it sounded like. You went 12, 10, 8, 6. Okay, and then the other one.
Those are all 1 year, so right? That's at 1 year for each of them, so it's 4 years. Or are you making it 8?
I have it as 8 here, and the reason I have 8, and I'd be happy to put one that's 4 years and have one that's 4 biennia. That's fine. I don't mind having multiple versions of this. The reason I have biennia is I know this would be a regulatory process for DMAS. I don't know that they would be able to get it done in a year, just because of the levels of review that go into a regulation. Even if they do a fast track, if it gets hung up at the Secretary's office or the Governor's office or at the Office of the Attorney General, that can add time onto a regulation, and it doesn't get done that quickly. I mean, I have something sitting at the Secretary's office that's been there for 300 days, for example. Not related to what we're doing here, but it's just been my experience that like budgeting 2 years for regulatory updates is probably a good idea, because you certainly can get it done in 2 years. You usually can get it done in under 2. But sometimes things happen and stuff gets hung up during the executive branch review process. And like I said, even a fast track, they would have to go through that process. That's the one thing I'd be concerned about, of limiting it to just 4 years. But if you want me to make an alternative one that is, instead of over 4 biennia, it is over 4 years, I can do that. That's not a problem. I'm just based on my experience with how regulations go and how quickly they move, even in a non-pandemic situation, they can take some time because of that multi-layer review process. Like I said, I can put that in there. I don't mind.
Okay. Like I said, if it gets started, that's all I care about. These people need people in there to for them.
Okay. And then this pay for performance, I have it starting at, so this is your hours one. Nursing care per resident. So I started at 3.5 and went to 4.1. That's based off of, I think, one of the more recent hours bills. It started at 3.5 and went up to 4.1. That one was also over biennia. If you want me to change it to years, I can, but it's the same sort of like cautionary tale of like the agency could miss the window, like not be able to hit the deadline that's imposed on it, because of just that extra review that goes on during regulations. So if you all, please let me know if you want the years version in there. That's fine. I don't mind. Like I said, these are alternatives to 21 and 22.
Barbara?
Those will all still pop up. Yes.
This is Barbara. I just ditto to what you were saying regarding regulations. The average is at least 18 months, and there's qualifiers for how the regulations are processed if you need them faster. I don't know that these would meet those, but again, I don't want all this to be in vain, but I don't know that DMAS normally would do this type of thing. And so that's why I need to get back with the provider reimbursement and maybe even policy folks, because a lot of this would be new regulations, and that's not going to happen overnight, as you said, Rebecca. It's a very long, involved process. So just FYI.
So do we want to leave it as biennia, or do we want to make it years? Just knowing that, just now that you've got the sort of inside knowledge on what goes on during part of the regulatory process, that it might not be able to hit the mark on the years. You can put it in there, but I'm just wanted to let you know.
No, I think if what you recommended, the process better than we do. I think whatever we can do to get it through and get it started is what I'm interested in. What do you guys say?
I agree. I think anything's an improvement, so I'm all for it.
Okay. So I'm going to take out the years version just because, like I said, the executive branch review process, even if DMAS can do this as a fast track, which I'm not sure that they can, because it would have to, there's all these qualifiers. Barbara's right. I don't see it getting done in under 12 months. 18 is the average that we shoot for just because of how long the branch review process takes. Assuming there's not a pandemic on, which I'm sure is part of the reason why some of my stuff has gotten slowed down. Okay, so I will insert this in. So let me go back to the presentation. Okay, so Let me turn back on my controls. And I'm sorry we're going a little bit over time here, but I just want to make sure we get this all squared away. So I'm going to hop down here, next steps. Okay. So here's what the next steps are. I went over the voting on recommendations thing earlier, but I'm going to just reminder, each stakeholder, which means your agency or organization, is going to get one vote per recommendation. You designate one person to vote on your behalf. If you need to change who that person is after you've emailed us, just let us know so we can send it to the right person. Your voting options will be support, oppose, or abstain. If you oppose it, totally fine. You are welcome to explain your opposition. And the form will tell you, like, either you can type your opposition directly into the form, or if you would prefer to write it out in a Word document and send it to me. Either of those is fine. Just tell me which one you're doing in the form so that if you don't fill something in for your why you oppose, that I know to expect that something will be coming. And the form will say this. Like, these instructions will all be repeated on the form. You don't have to memorize what's on the screen right now. For a recommendation to be included in the report, it has to be a simple majority in favor of its inclusion, and the voting is public, so it's not going to be secret ballots or anything like that. So this is what I'm looking at for the timeline, is that this Friday, so not tomorrow but the day after, every person on this work group, you're going to get a copy of the recommendations that we've discussed today, including all the changes and the tweaks that we made. And it's very clearly going to be labeled. It's going to be a PDF. It's clearly labeled like this is not the ballot. I'm giving you all the full and complete list so that you all can do whatever you're going to do internally within your organization and agency to hash out what your positions are. This way you have the list in front of you and you don't have to try to piece it together from the presentation. You'll have the list in its own standalone PDF to help guide your discussions, however you're going to do them in your organization. Totally up to you. I will be sending a link on October 9th to the Google Form ballot, and it's going to be sent to your designated voter. So if you're not the designated voter for your group and you don't get the link to this ballot, don't panic. You were never supposed to get the link. Only your designated voter is. If your designated voter happens to not get the link, they should contact me and let me know, and we'll figure out whatever that issue is. But I'm not anticipating there being a problem. On Monday, October 19th, the ballots are due by midnight. If those aren't received, we're just going to record your vote as an abstention for all the recommendations. Okay? I will send out a reminder email on Monday morning, October 19th, just to remind you that if you haven't gotten them in, like the deadline's approaching. So there will be a reminder email, but this is what I'm looking at. So we're going to have a meeting, on November 2nd, the draft work report will be distributed to the work group members. It will be a Word document that we're sending out. It's up to you how you want to mark it up. If you want to just come to the meeting to discuss the draft and not send me anything back, that's totally fine. If you want to use track changes inside of Microsoft Word and send that back to me, that's totally fine as well. Whichever you prefer, you can do both, whichever you'd like. On the 9th, we will have a meeting to discuss the draft. I'm hoping that we can get that squared away in one meeting, depending on how much feedback I get back on the draft in advance of the meeting. We may schedule the meeting to be longer than 3 hours, though if that's the case, I will build in breaks because that would be a long meeting. And then Friday, November 13th, that final draft is going to be distributed to you all, and then we have to send it downtown to be filed. Okay?
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Yes?
This is Carol. I think you might want to talk about whether if someone has a favorite option that is very similar to another option, should they vote on their favorite only and vote against the other option, or should they vote in favor of every option that they like? Do you see what I'm getting at? We're not trying to rank the recommendations. It's my understanding we're not ranking these. So you might want to talk about that a little bit.
Correct. So we're not ranking recommendations. So let's take the service learning, for example. There's like 3 of them. You can vote yes for all of them. You can vote no for all of them. You can vote yes for 2, however you want to do it. If you've got a strong preference for one, that's fine, but it's more, like I said, it's a simple majority that's going to get it in. There's no ranked choice voting here, and when we write the report, they will not be numbered in terms of this is recommendation number one because it got the most votes. That's not how it's going to be structured. The recommendations will be grouped topically within the report. So certainly vote for your favorites, but if you are fine with the alternative option, so let's take the financial support program that we talked about. That was one was for child care, one was for transport, and one was a general catch-all. You may only really love the transport one, but you vote for the transport one and the catch-all because it could include transport. That would be how you'd want to vote. That way, at least part of it gets in. So that would be just my suggestion to you. Is don't get too narrowly focused on the ones you love, because the ones you love may not get enough votes to have a simple majority in favor, in which case you didn't vote on the acceptable alternative. You didn't vote to support the acceptable alternative, and that might not get in either, okay? So thank you, everyone. Like I said, this Friday you're going to get an email from me that has all of the recommendations, and they will be numbered. The order they appear on the PDF that I'll send you on Friday is the exact same order that you're going to see them on the ballot, so it's not going to jump around on you. I've been very conscientious of how I've built this ballot. So if you vote support on something, it's not going to take you to the page to explain your opposition. I have all this conditional logic built into it, so it should only show you what you voted on. If you oppose, it'll give you the option only then to explain your opposition, and it will all be in order according to how it's written on the PDF that I'm going to send you. So thank you, everyone, so much for your time today. I know this has been a long meeting, this one and the one before, about the recommendations, but I would like to thank you, everyone. We did great work on Friday. We did great work today, and look forward to that email from me on Friday and also the Friday thereafter, which will have the ballot. And if you have anything you need to, yes, and Dana has asked, I will include this in my email on Friday, the list of everyone who's going to be voting. And by everyone, I mean the organizations, because names may not mean a lot to you all. So I will send out the list of organizations that will be voting, just so you have an idea of who's on the slate. And with that being said, everyone have a great rest of your day, and happy early October.
One last thing. So the next meeting we have is November 9th, right?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to clear. No meetings until November 9th.
No, because you all need time to, of course, discuss amongst yourselves which recommendations you're going to support, vote on that, and then Dr. Pratt and I, while that's all ongoing, we will be writing the other parts of the report that are not the recommendation section. So then when the ballots are all collected and we know what recommendations go in, then we start writing the recommendations part of it. So yeah, that process is going to take us a couple weeks to do. So November 9th, put it on your calendar. I will be sending out a WebEx invitation for that probably tomorrow morning. Just looking at my calendar right now, I have another meeting I have to hop on to. So, but it will be tomorrow. You'll get the October 9th, and like I said, you'll get the November 9th. And you'll get the email from me that has the ballot, all the recommendations, I should say, and the list of folks who will be voting, organizations who will be voting on Friday. So have a good day, everyone. Thank you for hanging on a little bit longer on this call. And again, have a good Wednesday and have a very happy October. Talk to you later.